Getting me started. So, audio's on?
Yep, I'll confirm in the other room, but.
All right. Agenda. Welcome, everyone, the board and public, and as well all those you watching remotely. Thanks so much for tuning in. We have a special meeting, we're calling it this month, because basically we looked at the agenda for next week and it's entirely fully loaded. So I think we pulled out mostly policies we want to talk through, and it's our job as the board to go over policies. We're responsible for policies, and we need to review them every few years. So we pulled out a big chunk of policies that are kind of related, and we'll have a special workshop here tonight to go over that. So thanks for you guys. I know we've been super busy, and February is already busy with a lot of other meetings, so thank you for your time. I know it's precious. I am going to do a roll call of, mission and vision, Maggie.
Sure. Our mission is we provide accelerated curricula in all subjects with an emphasis on math and science. And the vision is to be an innovative, sustainable model of academic excellence that creates well-rounded, lifelong learners and global citizens.
And I made a mistake. I should have had you read off the website, because we have copied the old one.
That's right.
And we did make a change. So, do you want to read off mine here?
Well, yes,
I can just read it.
I can do that. I apologize. To be an innovative, sustainable model of academic excellence for all students that creates well-rounded, lifelong learners and global citizens. And the mission is we provide accelerated and inclusive curriculum and instruction in all subjects with an emphasis on math and science.
Thank you, Maggie. And I got to get the agenda cleaned up. It's my fault for copying old ones. So, my haste. So I'll do roll call of members. So Dan Youngson's here, Jennifer Bartle.
Here.
Michelle Krakowski.
Here.
Maggie Burgraff.
Here.
Eric Fair.
Here.
Annie Cardenas.
Here.
Cody Schneid.
Here.
Jeff Eng.
Here.
Sandy Overson.
Here.
Very good. So next up is the approval of the agenda. We have listed, and any conflict of interest. So any conflict of interest, please speak up now. Otherwise, can I get a motion to approve the agenda we're calling policy discussion?
All motion.
Any second?
This is Maggie, I'll second.
Any discussion?
So I have a question. I mean, originally when I had asked to have, a special meeting, one of the topics I wanted to cover was addressing an email that had been sent, and it had to do with what had happened at the last meeting. And, I mean, that was like 3 weeks ago, and we keep having these discussions, and we end up having a meeting, and it's not on the agenda. I just don't know how that happens. I mean, I asked for it, and that's the reason, for me, to have this meeting, at least to cover that, and other things, because we're gonna have a big meeting next Tuesday. So I don't know if we can amend the agenda now or not, but I just want to know why it isn't on this agenda.
Yeah, I can start on that one. So I think the question that we're talking about here, and for those folks that are listening at home, we've had some emails back and forth as the board, so just to catch you up as well. We had a question over kind of what's our role, if you will. So we have we're all, if you will, we're all on the same team. We each have different roles to play. One of the things that I think we are, as a group, struggling with is we all have different interpretations, plus we all have different policies that are not exactly kind of all aligned. If you read one policy that's listed here, it'll say the board does this. You read another policy, it says administration does this. Another policy says something else. So the attempt at trying to kind of get some clarity there was to see if we as a board, which we're responsible for policies, that's the main thing we're responsible for, policies and budget, these are the things that we do. Can we as a board agree, we got to clean up our act as policies, right? We have listed 5 or 6 policies. They don't all quite jive together. And so that was an attempt to try to get at that very question without specifically just saying, here's one question and how do we answer it? It seemed like we were jumping it a bit if we didn't all agree. So I think out of tonight's discussion, let's see how far we can make in terms of progress. But if we can kind of as a board say, here, this policy has these statements that need to be cleaned up. This is clearly in this camp, this is in this other camp. That would go a long ways towards answering that question, which was brought up and said, hey, We had a decision at the board meeting, just to clear the air, a board meeting last month where there was questions raised, was that a board decision or should that have been an administrative decision or how does that work? And I think depending on which policy you pick and choose, you could have come to a different conclusion, and that's not fair. We need to be clear to the administration, we need to be clear to the teachers and to our students, how should each system, go through. So if we don't have clarity, I think that's our job to kind of clean it up and provide that clarity to the board, to the rest of the school, actually, not just the board. But we need to be clear as well, because I feel like we were voting with different, we were trying to vote with our conscience on what we felt was right for the school, which is the first thing. But the second piece is we had a different understanding of what our role was in this particular vote. And then, of course, we come with a different conclusion. So let's try to see, that was the attempt at laying out each policy separately. And let's just have an open discussion about, does this make sense? Is this our understanding, or do we need to change something?
Well, I mean, from a policy standpoint, I think that's good, because on a go-forward basis, that helps. We need
Yeah,
that clarity,
yeah.
and we need that understanding, but that doesn't change what happened, and we have to independently have a conversation on what to do with it. Now, if we have that conversation and we say, hey, it's all about policy, and we go forward, that's great. But I think we actually have to have a conversation to even get there, because otherwise you ignore the specific fact situation of what actually happened. And you can't apply a policy retroactively and somehow make everything go away. So that's why we actually have to see it for what it is for that one instance. And I get what you mean, because at the end of the day, when we move forward, these policy discussions will be great. I mean, we have to have that understanding. But once again, it doesn't answer some very specific things on the last go-around at the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's right. So depending on how far we get tonight, I think we'll kind of start to answer the question that you have. If we as a board are kind of stuck and we can't agree as a board on what should or shouldn't be in our policies, then we have to probably have some more work to do, right? Because we need to agree as a board, not that we all have to vote unanimously, but we need to agree on what the board's role is. And that, let's see how far we can get on that alignment, if you will, tonight. And
I
then,
just don't agree on the which comes first.
sure,
I mean,
yeah.
you've chosen one, and that's not originally why I thought we should have that first discussion. And we're not gonna settle it today. We just need that discussion to say, what are the next steps?
Yep,
And
yep.
maybe the next step is, we talk about policy, and that is the first step. But
Yep.
we haven't had that discussion, and of course, we can't have it outside this meeting, so I was hoping we can get together and have that open discussion, so we have a better feel of how to go forward. Because I think eventually, there's gotta be some sort of response there too, to the
Well, I thought
public.
there was a
So-
3-day response, or a 3-day something.
Yeah, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think the one thing that I was thinking about there, I actually did a little bit of looking on some of the Roberts Rules forums and some of their FAQs and like the idea of a special meeting and how does a special meeting happen? I think that's one of our policy opportunities is we don't really state how a special meeting can happen other than that they can happen. Some of the other places that I found are the chair has sole rights. Other ones I found are quorum. So do we have consensus that we need a special meeting? If yes, okay, otherwise it defaults to the chair making a decision. I think that's part of what the challenge is now around policy and why I think policy is important so that we can all be aligned on if we're gonna call a special meeting and we want the topics, a specific topic to be addressed, how does the board follow policy to make that happen? And if we don't have a policy about it, then it's unclear.
And if you-
So, I mean, these are topics that I'm hoping we'll address when we go through like bylaws, right? Because we have that section. But on the agenda, which is right now what we need to make sure we covered, are we, maybe it's not 100% what we all want, but, and also, it's not fair to list them the way I did, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because they all overlap. So my plan was, we need to be a little bit flexible here, we're gonna go through, but if 208 says something contradictory to 209, we're gonna have to try to fold that in, or let's see how we can manage it as we go through, because I couldn't think of a clean way to put them all in without us, because there's so much overlap here, but, yeah, go
I
ahead.
will say that 103 and 208 are standalone.
Mhm.
So like the complaints and the one about how we adopt policies, like those, so those two I think could
Okay,
just
I
be-
just threw out a number, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
okay,
those
okay,
two
yeah,
can be like
yeah.
separate. The others, I do see how they all kind of inform each other, but those two,
Okay.
108?
103 and 208.
Sorry, 208 and
Development
208
adoption.
and
603?
103.
103 is
So the
not on
complaints
tonight,
one?
is it?
I had it as
That's
one.
not on my
It's not on
agenda.
my agenda.
Oh, I had it as one, sorry. On
So
my
we need
notes.
to add that to the agenda?
Nope, nope, it's a non-substantive, it just is what,
Oh.
oh, I see, I had, yeah, okay.
We're gonna talk about that one on Tuesday then?
Yeah,
Okay.
or like, it's non-substantive changes, like title changes and stuff.
We just look
That
at
we
it
just have
in the
to do.
notes.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the agenda?
Are we gonna add something then? At the end of just maybe have a discussion about it and decide whether we need to table it for a different day or whether we can discuss it after going through these?
Yeah, so I guess in my mind,
Yeah.
that's part of the whole discussion, but it sounds like we'd like to add, so I'm not saying no, that the whole point of having tonight's session is to address that very question. Is the board aligned, and can we answer a complaint, if you will, that the board is not following the procedures? That was the complaint, right? Not following the policies. And so we're going through the policies right now, and I agree, some people want to do it in the reverse order. I'm suggesting that we all align on what our policies are. Are those correct? If not, then we need to change them. And if they are correct, then we need to go back and say, why was the decisions made the way they were? So it's chicken and egg, exactly like you said, Jeff. But I hope we can kind of try this process out and come back. So let's say at the end, we're going to try to keep it to 2 hours as best we can. And let's have a discussion and alignment on the end on how we address if we haven't yet. Is that okay?
Do we want to add it
Sure.
to
So G.
after? Oh, G.
I have F through F, right? Is that right?
I have E through E, A, B, C, D, E. Do you have it?
F, use of portable electronic devices.
That one was
It's
just
in-
one that we pulled out of the February one.
If you look in the packet, it's there.
Yeah, you've got, so wait. You have,
Oh, I have A twice, that's why. Sorry,
okay,
never
yeah,
mind.
so,
Okay,
Never mind.
so let's just do like a plan,
Next steps. would be
next
better.
steps, sure. Okay. Any other discussion, or can we move forward with that as amended? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good discussion, all right, great. So, just real quick, like I mentioned, I think the main purpose of tonight, if we can all kind of agree, is how do we work together with all the different parts that we have at the school, right? I mean, just clearly delineating who's responsible for what, I think will clear up a lot of the confusion. And so let's see what we can't do to kind of make that a reality. One of the questions I think we'll get a chance to address is, the board clearly has policies and budget, and we also hire our administration. The administration is the one that would hire the staff, right? And then the staff would be mainly teaching, but the staff would do staff stuff. So we have these three buckets, that's super broad strokes, right? And how do we, I think we're talking about some of these things in the middle where we feel like there's a little bit of overlap. The board feels we want to do some things, administration feels that's within their camp, teachers may feel they have some responsibilities here too to help the school. So we're all trying to help the school, but we need to help set out some more guidelines, and I think our policies overlap. That's my editorial. I'll try not to editorialize too much here tonight so we can save some time for discussions. But let's move to bylaws, the first one. So I will listen, or we will listen to comments or questions, proposals, change. We had listed two, student representative and special meeting clarification, but there are probably others. So Michelle?
there was one third, and I just realized it now, and I'm so sorry that I didn't like make a notation. But remember when we had an individual who was elected, but they hadn't yet been seated? And we didn't actually have a thing in our bylaws, so we tried to err on the side of caution and still have
Another
like an
election.
election process.
Yeah.
Is that, I know the circumstance isn't common, but is that something that would be good just to have in there? Because
I think so.
Yeah, let's clean that up.
it was just a hole in the bylaws, so like
Yeah.
if, say, teacher representative A was elected, but then leaves the school prior to being seated.
Oh.
You know, technically it says if a seated member is, you know, so it's always a seated member that is referenced. And it was an unusual circumstance, so it may never happen again. But is that something that we wanted to put in here as a, hey, rare but is still possible?
Yeah, I think that'd be good. I have another, just something that occurred to me now. Under membership, the parent member has to have an enrolled student, but I think there were questions in the past, since the election happens after the lottery, does that, if they're, have been accepted from the lottery, but they haven't, like, when is a student enrolled for the purposes of a parent?
The student is enrolled at the February board meeting, so.
When it's official?
Yep,
That's
that's
true.
when they'll be
Because we vote
enrolled.
them in.
So they could take, so before we didn't,
So we need to, because I think in the past it's come out as a parent that when are they eligible to run for the parent positions?
So in your scenario, the student is enrolled for the first time in February, and there would be a parent that wants to be a parent board member in the following school year? Or, well, seated in.
Starting
in June.
Because the election's starting soon,
But seated in
But they'll
June.
be enrolled.
but seated in
So they're,
June.
they're actually seated after technically they're, or at the same time, or just a little bit after the enrollment of the students happens. So,
Yep, so their student would be enrolled.
yeah.
So I don't know if.
Should we just parentheses like lottery?
I honestly.
No, enrolled is a clean line.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think so.
okay.
And we've known from experience too, that then if you're a parent who no longer has a child at the school,
Yep.
you can no longer have your parent board
Yeah.
position. So I think.
Well, and I think, that happened,
Yeah.
So actually, that's a great question, because we asked that of ourselves, because graduation happened, say, on the Friday of the first week. But technically, I didn't leave the board, or wouldn't normally leave the board for like another week.
Oh,
So I think we,
like a line about.
yeah. I mean,
Like, once your student is no longer enrolled, you're still on the board until the next board meeting or something.
You finish out your term.
Or-
Actually, that's what happened. I
Well,
finished
but
out
what
my-
happens,
I mean, finished out
Should
my
we just
year,
say
pardon me, my
only
year.
in graduation?
but that's for a
Because
graduation scenario. What if your kid just
goes to.
Changes
school.
just
schools, yeah.
leaves?
Well,
you
then that
should
would
be-
happen immediately. That one is
Yeah,
actually a
you
brighter
should be
line.
Then they're no
Well-
longer enrolled,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they're no longer enrolled, but when would the switchover happen? Would that parent still come to the next board meeting and, resign, or like, I don't know.
So what happened is, I attended the meeting after my kids graduated. It was 1 week after. We took care of the end of the year business. I was still a board member for that. Nothing major happened, kind of the usual end of the year stuff. And then I just left, and we turned it over normally, which is halfway through with the new board members.
Well, okay, I guess what the question is, when does a student graduate?
usually before the board meeting of that June.
So like, well, when they walk across the stage, that's a ceremony, but are they formally graduated and no longer enrolled?
Yes.
Okay.
Which happens when?
June 3rd, so,
About the same time.
The last day
Almost
of
the same
school.
time, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of authorize it, you do all the audits and everything, and, I don't know.
Yeah, they get their little placards, the case for now, but then they get that.
So are we okay with enrolled as the
So-
Yeah, I
definition?
mean,
Enroll is close enough.
yeah.
Well,
I had a question, and one of them is listed. I think maybe Michelle, you brought it up, adding another student representative.
Yes, I had,
Well, I was just gonna build on that a little bit, so I love having, Sydney here or somebody here, but what about the idea of a middle school, student as well as a high school student? Something
I
big,
don't think that it would make sense to mandate which position is which. Right now, it is any student in grades 9 through 12. So right now, it's high school. If we wanted to change it to include middle school, we can. My concerns with that would be along the lines, like transportation becomes an issue. It's also why often ninth graders, we don't have, because regular transportation becomes an issue. And also just experience with the school. But yeah, my main concern with that would be transportation, but we could change it to 6-12. But then if you don't have a middle school candidate, and we have viable candidates for high school, I would still like them to be able to do so.
So maybe change it to 2 representatives, both 6 through 12?
If you would like, I wouldn't agree to that, but again, I would be 1 vote out of 9.
well, we're so heavy in middle school, that was where the idea came from, is can we bring in some of their perspective? Because I agree with you, they're pretty fresh to the school, but also maybe that's an asset to the board, is what they're seeing, in the middle school, maybe different than somebody who's been here for a few years.
So I haven't thought about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I just don't don't think a middle school child is old enough. I mean, we have late meetings. I just really don't think a parent is gonna want them. I mean, they're like age 11 to 14. I mean, it's 14. I just think it's too young. I mean, maybe have 2 high school and they switch off, or if it's too much. I mean, is that why we're doing it? Because it's too much for one? Or are we doing it?
To get more student voice.
Yeah, the
We're doing it
student-
to get more
the
student
part
voice.
Yeah,
has to happen.
Cecilia?
I have
Okay.
a couple of thoughts about this. One is through the strategic planning and World's Best Workforce, we always ask all students for input on lots of things. It's pretty rare to get a middle schooler who has their head together well enough and is comfortable enough to share. So we have some of those rare kids who would do it, but I would say it'd be pretty uncommon. So that would be one thing, maybe from a practical standpoint, we just wouldn't get them.
Yeah.
They're just not there yet, you know? But then the second thing is, regardless of whether we added a second student, the students have been asking me, ever since World's Best Workforce, can we have a student town hall, they've called it, where I think they imagine asking questions. And they want administration and board members. They want both. And I keep telling them, I'm trying to get to it, and I think we need to have one starting in March. And maybe there's somehow that link from that group. It's advisory to the administration, the way I see it. But since they want board members there too, maybe there's some link through Sydney or through both student board members to bring that back. You know, because otherwise the students don't have a formal way, Sydney doesn't have a formal way that she's getting student input anyway. Not that that should be a channel just for her, but maybe she can interpret some of that advice. So I don't want to muddy the water here on your question, but I keep forgetting to bring it up. So.
Well, but originally, if we're trying to add another student, it's because we're trying to be, or seek more voices. And I like that idea, because we're not just seeking one more, we're seeking
Right, I like that.
the voices of anyone who wants to.
So I guess the question is, do we want to focus on getting a second student? Or do we want to focus on getting support in place to help the representative we have a better information stream? So that they can provide broader feedback?
I honestly would think both. I think that it is possible. We can have an election set up so that we would be able to have 2 representatives so that they have a permanent voice. And I do think that it's possible, especially because, I mean, you're not gonna have the entire board there, so we can, you know, take turns at different town halls, but having that as an, you know, as an.
It is a
option.
big undertaking to be on a board, even if you're the student representative.
It is.
So if they can switch off some of the duties that,
You know, or no, I was saying that the board members at the town hall, like the student town hall, that like, not all of us would be there, but we could, you know, kind of rotate a bit. But then also too, if there was a student representative who had a conflict, then they would still know that the student voice was at the meeting, if one of them couldn't
At the
make
board
it.
meeting?
Yeah, so
If
if
we
there
had
were
the two,
two,
yeah, okay.
we would have 2 voices, but then if, you know, for some reason they have a conflict or something really big happening the next day, or they kind of have to, you know, they have an AP test or something and they've got to get sleep, then they would still know that there is a student voice at the meeting.
second question, in the past, have we had multiple students volunteer?
We have
a good
until
question.
like the last 3 years. But
Okay,
and I think part of that has to do with how, like, just making sure that we kind of also, not by policy, because I don't want to do that, but just maybe by procedure or agreement, like how and the means by which we can publicize the information, because we put it in the announcements, and I do read the announcements in my classroom every morning, but that's not always the case in every classroom. So if, as a board, you want STUDCO to run it again, or sorry, Student Council, sorry, if you're listening, it's an abbreviation for Student Council. Then they can go to the advisories 1 week, talk about, you know, bring our student rep, bring a couple of the board reps with them, or like the student council reps with them, talk to the advisories. Have the advisory teachers post the candidate statements to their Google Classrooms, as well as us posting them around the school and online. You know what I mean? So just have it be a multi-staged thing where, you know what you're signing up for, you understand that your voice is important and this is how, you know, you can share that, just doing a little bit more promo around what it is, and I do think that that would be impactful.
So back to this question, am I hearing general consensus, maybe having 2 student? Or is there anyone opposed to adding an additional student representative?
We could phrase it as 1 to 2, depending upon applicants.
Sure. I was
gonna-
Depending upon availability of applicants.
Could we also
Yeah,
just
like
do
that.
6 to 12? And I agree with what you're saying, that we probably are gonna skew towards the more high school, but if we had somebody who was a go-getter in 6, 7, 8, I feel like, why would we not let them?
I agree with Jennifer. I think if I was gonna do it, I would say 8, 12. Because a 6th grader is, they're very young, but also just, they're
More
still getting,
candy. Can we have more candy?
yeah, they're still getting
They
their
have to go to
footing.
bed on time.
Like the 6th and 7th graders are
They
still
have to
really
go to
getting their footing. And so I think at a meeting, I agree with Cecilia too.
Well,
Okay.
thinking back when I was a 6th grader, I don't know if I would have had the self-awareness to advocate for anyone but myself.
Sure, I agree.
Uh,
One other question along these lines, just to keep poking at things. Would it make sense to have parents of middle school or parents of high school? I'm not quite ready to say you have to, have one position here or one or the other, kind of like we did the parent and teacher for board and chair, But just maybe we target to have, middle school parent, a parent of a middle schooler, because hopefully they're ready to be contributing.
One problem I have with that, let's say they just have one student here, they start in 8th grade at middle school, and then now their kid's in high school.
So that's why I'm
Would
saying
would they
target.
lose their
No,
eligibility?
No, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to make it so technical. I want to encourage somebody who's a parent of somebody, new to bring in some fresh thoughts and ideas. What can they do to help the board, right? What can they do to help the school, I should say better. So it's just an idea, and the same could be for teachers too. If we were to say, hey, we have a lot of middle school teachers, how do we get that voice into the board? And same with the parents, same with the kids. It's just how do we get all of that kind of fed in? I don't want to be so legalistic. This is my own opinion. You guys disagree with me. I don't want to be so legalistic that our board is impossible to fill, right? Because we have to get
That would be a
every
concern.
little thing. So I would like maybe a little more flexibility where we say we try to encourage parents of middle schoolers to apply, and we have a few people we want to have in the election from different middle school, from high school, or what have you. Just a thought.
And I think we can do that procedurally. I don't think we need to add the language to the bylaws.
Well, I mean, if you end up, like in my case, 6th and 8th grade, right? I was 6th, 8th grade here, all of a sudden I'm teaching 10th grade. And if I'm on as a middle school teacher, now what do I do next year when I'm teaching high school? Like you're off,
So
But-
I'm not proposing that we kick people off when they're no longer in a criteria. I'm just saying, can we try to be more active in targeting
Right,
different
so-
groups to
so
bring
if
in some more
that's-
diversity?
Then what does that look like?
Yeah, and that's why
I
I'm-
think this is not a policy discussion.
Yeah, it
So
really
I
isn't.
think this is advocating for what we want. I mean,
More
the board is,
strategic,
board is
right?
already,
Advertise,
the
but-
policy is pretty broad.
Yeah, it is.
Then why do we call it out under membership? I guess that's what, we're describing what a parent is, what a teacher is, and I'm just,
I think those are the base, because we talk
Yeah.
about Minnesota law, that is the very baseline definitions. So,
It'll be in accordance
That-
with
that's
Minnesota
why
law,
we're
3
there.
parents,
The only time
4
it
licensed
says it is
teachers,
nine.
2 community members,
I mean, the policy.
and 1 student.
The underlying policy discussion here is inclusion and getting people engaged. So, I'd like to have that discussion, or the fact that we just had it, because I think that's a great example of, you can't draw a bright line and say, well, yeah, it's not a policy discussion. I mean, actually, that was, because of the implications of how we're managing the board and board members, so.
I guess what I was trying to say is, should we have in the policy a high schooler parent versus a middle schooler parent? I'm saying no, that's not a policy discussion. That should be something that we discuss as a board and advocate for as a board
Yeah.
within a.
Well, as in, do we need a policy written?
We do
I would
not need
agree
a
with
policy
that.
written,
I
but
would-
that's what I was trying to say.
But I-
There is the one spot where it says, in 1 student who must be enrolled in grades 9 to 12. If we feel like it should say 1 to 2, enrolled in grades 8 to 12, okay, that's a policy decision they'd have to make, or not.
Yeah, well, so that it changes the grand
That's really the
total
only
makeup
thing
of
that
the
we're
board.
talking about right now,
Yeah.
with the policy, yeah.
It changes the makeup of the board. Even though both are still ex officio, it's still,
Right.
it's
So-
changing our civil.
could we make a motion to change the student one to include up to 2, and we said from 8th through 12th grade?
Well, you proposed 8
Well,
through
that-
12. Maybe we can do the number first and
I
then the
propose
age.
6, but I'm willing to
Do we
go
want to
to
make
8.
this two separate discussions, one for the number and one for the
You
age?
can go ahead and propose 6. I'm not proposing 8.
Well, I just want to kind of make some progress here because we have a few more things to cover tonight. So I'm going to be the bad guy and keep moving us
So you're gonna
along.
make a motion or no?
So I will make a motion that we include up to 2 students from grades 8 through 12. And can I get a second?
Hold on a second.
Great.
2 students,
Up to 2.
Well, it needs to be 1 to 2, because up to 2 could mean 0.
Okay, 1 to 2
Yeah,
students.
good call. Good
And
call,
then-
1 to 2.
And depending on the number of
Technicalities.
candidates.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, if you second the motion.
wait,
Wait a minute.
say it one more time.
If we say 1 to 2, I don't know if it's necessary. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we should have 1. I think we're talking about
Yeah.
getting the second one, so we're saying.
If we say 1 to 2, is it implied that it would, if we have additional candidates? I mean,
Yeah, I think we're okay, 1 to 2.
Motion to
And-
include
and
1
it's-
to 2
I don't have a
students.
second yet.
change it to be.
I'll make a second. Annie.
Okay, thanks, Annie.
That's it?
So,
Motion to include
Annie
1 to 2
seconded it.
students.
Anything.
Any further discussion on that? It's a very specific one.
So we're just doing the number, not the grade age group.
I added 8 through 12.
Oh, wait, okay, all I have is motion to include 1 to 2.
Okay, let's do that one
students.
first. Is that what you
Because
seconded,
that's what I,
Annie?
Yeah,
is
that's
that?
what
Okay.
I seconded.
Okay,
Okay.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
That's
Opposed?
everybody?
Okay, so that,
I'm opposed.
okay. 8 to 1. And then, I guess I can make a motion that we open it up. Is it one more year?
Mhm. 8 through 12, is that what you're saying?
You get a little bit of middle schooling in there. So I will make a motion that we move it from 9 to 8, include 8 through 12. 8 through 12. Anyone second?
This is Maggie, I'll second.
Okay. Second, any further discussion? Then we,
I gotta say, I'm just really confused by this, like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? I get that adding another one, making it 8th grade versus 9th grade.
It's
1
allowing,
year.
it's only 1 year, but it is allowing some middle schoolers to participate
Okay.
If they choose.
if they
If they
choose.
choose.
yeah, we're not
But
forcing
We
it.
still have
Yeah.
to vote on, the kids have to vote
Yes.
on
Yeah.
the
Well, and if no 8th grader self-nominates, it's
Right.
not really an issue. Or, they have to not, if they don't run, they don't run, so.
So would we be okay if there was only an 8th grader and nobody from high school, like the 1 to 2, and that one is 8th grade? Are we
I'm okay,
comfortable with
I'm
that?
okay with that.
What
I
if we
think
have
that
two?
the potential missed meetings would be too high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if we have 2 that are seniors? You're okay with that? Or do we want to have a middle and,
I think what we all want is an actively engaging student to come to the board and represent the student voice that we maybe don't have, right? So we can pick and choose grades, but I'm saying it doesn't matter on the grade. I've probably seen 8th graders that are probably better suited for the board than a 12th grader, 12th grader. So I can't say that as an 8th grader or 12th grade, maybe the teachers have better experience there. My kids are not quite there yet, but I'm just saying, bring anyone who wants to come, give them a voice, let them sit here. And I know that they can sit in the open part, but I would love to have more people sitting on the board too, if they wanted to.
What is the
And
current process for nominating the student
It's the
representative?
student council.
They submit their candidate statement. So anybody in grades 9 through 12, they submit their candidate statement, we post all of them. Students have usually 1 to 2 weeks to review the candidate statements. And in the past, we've been able to have voting in advisory, so that we can get everybody.
Is there a way for the board to be more active in selection of a student representative?
In what way? Like, do you want?
Well, I guess I'm getting to, if we're talking about we want more active participation from students, to me, one of the solutions to that is, well, let's find students that want to be more active and have them be a part of the board, instead of just opening it up more broadly, so there's a better statistical chance, like versus 1 versus 2, which isn't really statistically significant. Can we be more active, or there can be a process whereby we help or find those kids that want to be passionate and active about it and are gonna have a voice to participate?
There's nothing, I think that recruiting is a good thing. I think that would be a good thing.
There's nothing in the policy that says we can't do that. I have trouble if we change it to make it where we're recruiting people. I mean, I have no
Yeah.
problem
Yep.
saying, for one of the teachers to say, hey, you're really passionate about these things, you should run for the student board position. But to only take students that a teacher recommends without letting the student self-nominate.
That's, yeah.
That
Totally
also
agree with
does-
that. I totally agree with that.
So I think,
I'm just trying to get at, if the root cause is we want more active participation on the board, I'm not sure just adding another seat as a student representative and then not doing something about it to be more active will actually have any
But I
positive
think
effect.
all of our students who've been on the board have been very active.
Yep,
So we
this-
do- we
no-
don't have
nothing
a
here was to
faulty-
say that
not
there's
a faulty
criticisms of
process
anybody in the
thinking
past.
That, we're just saying we're gonna double that, and the eighth grade does bring another set of eight issues, so.
I think that maybe the best thing to do is we'll just leave it for 1 to 2. If we're not getting even 2 candidates, maybe then we have to reevaluate what's maybe going on. And that can be, advocating for students to run isn't part of the policy. We're just talking about the numbers of students was part of the policy. Actually, how we go about that is not part of the policy
And I
tonight.
don't think it should be.
So-
I agree with that.
And I think student voices, nominating another student, that is the student voice versus us trying to, plus the fact, you know what, these kids know who's gonna show up. They really know their people and who's gonna show up and who's gonna.
Can I ask a quick, because I think the motion is 8th grade now, so is there anyone who has a strong feeling we shouldn't move it down to open up 8th? I don't,
What about a moderate feeling?
Yeah,
Okay. I would like to hear the reason why 8 doesn't make sense, and then we can put it to a vote, so we can keep the discussion moving.
I know that the 8th graders have an excellent voice, and if they are our only representative, my concern would be the number of potential missed meetings would mean we would have multiple meetings without student voice. Transportation is an issue. Transportation is even an issue like in a 10th and 11th grade student. For an 8th grade student, there's no chance that they would be able to drive themselves.
Right.
So that would just be, and again, like whether the parent is, if they run, then their parents are kind of also
Signed
committing
up,
to.
yep, sure.
So that's just my concern.
Any other concerns with the 8th
I
grade?
think it's a little late at night.
A little late.
Well,
11 o'clock meetings?
What's wrong with that?
I understand where you're coming from. It does, I think somewhere in here, if members aren't coming and can't make it, they either take them off the board or make them step down or appoint someone else.
Yeah.
So maybe we just rely on that. They might run, and if they get here, and this could be for any student, a senior could go, I signed up for this, and after 3 months going, I didn't know what I was signing up for. So, that part of we have something else for that already kind of in the policy.
So
So-
for the sake of,
What's the usual grade that,
for the sake
on the
of,
board?
oh, sorry, Sandy, go ahead.
what's the,
Juniors and
11th.
seniors.
Yeah.
juniors and seniors are the ones who usually.
Usually, but that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
9s and 10s cannot.
Yeah.
So
But I mean,
then
we
I'm just
just,
thinking maybe there won't be any eighth graders who want to do it.
and there may, and it may be super, super awesome. I was just saying my
Yeah.
concern generally, like, would be against
So-
non-parent.
For what we get for one extra year, I would like to put it to a vote right now, if we could, just so we can move on to some other discussions, because I'm not gonna spend an hour on this question, if that's okay. So all those in favor of changing it from 9th to 8th grade, I think we had a second, right?
Yep.
So raise your hand. So 2 opposed? Is it 6, 7? Okay, let's
I want to
move
make sure
on.
I'm voting for the right thing.
Sorry?
because
You wanna
when
keep it at
repeated,
9.
I actually-
Keep it at-
Keep it at 9, yeah.
Keep it at 9
Okay,
to
raise
12.
your hand if you want 8 to 12,
I think there's 2.
and then raise your hand if keeping it from 9 to 12. There we
So
go.
let's move on to the
Thank
next
you.
topic for the sake of time. I had a question I'd like to raise, and that is the special meetings, because that came up, and to be honest, I reviewed, we had questions. Should we call a special meeting? And we had both camps. Some people, I won't say who, some people saying, for what? Other people saying, let's do it. And then we were stuck because we didn't really have a procedure on how to do it. So I would like to change that. We have it says, the board may call additional meetings.
This is section 7.
Section
meetings and
7, yeah.
bylaws.
Go ahead.
Policy 205 has the procedures for special meetings.
Policy 205, okay, that one was not on for tonight.
No, I didn't know
Okay.
you wanted to review the special meetings, otherwise I would mention it.
Okay, but that would be good, then I review that one, because
Well,
I just reviewed the
actually,
bylaws.
I would say the calling of a special meeting is not contained in that policy. It talks about they'll post written notice, it should be emailed, post on the website, limit the request to particular subjects, in which case the board of directors is required to send notice, but that doesn't give anything about approval. Filing a request for notice of special meeting, it doesn't dictate whether it's a board member or whether it's a parent or somebody else. So I still think there's not clarity.
I would like to make a proposal that the board, and I am the board chair right now, but the board chair can call a special meeting, or the board can call a special meeting through majority consent. So
I have a
basically,
How do you
question
get
though.
that though?
sorry?
How do you get that though?
I believe we can do, I believe we can do a consent over email.
Yeah.
I believe we can do consent over email to the question, if somebody from the board says, Dan's not calling a meeting and I want a meeting called, 5 votes come in and then we have a special meeting. So I think it shouldn't be the board
So-
only, chair only.
So what I did for the finance topic is I did a Google poll. And since, you got the link and all you're doing is voting, there's no discussion. So if we do something, a procedure like that, we can give input, but there's not discussion where we're actually discussing anything that could be construed as a violation of the open meetings. Does that,
So I did a little bit of looking, and I think it's the same kind of idea of consent. So we're just kind of saying, we all feel we need to have a discussion about this, special meeting needs to be called. And if any board chair in the future says no, they can be overruled by a majority. I think that's a good check balance.
so I think,
Yeah.
it sounds like it should fit in this,
The bylaw meeting right here.
Seven.
I think.
So on section 7, we should add,
Special meetings.
no, but you said policy
the
205?
board chair can call an additional meeting or through majority board
What's the name
consent.
of the policy?
Oh, boy. This one is,
Well, my
Open
my
meeting, closed
question,
meetings.
so when we're looking at setting it, so do you want to change it in the bylaws or do you want to change it in policy 205?
well, honestly, I had looked at the bylaws when I was looking for, do we have due process for calling a special meeting? And that's where I saw that it was pretty generic. But I don't think it really matters.
Which is easier to
Yeah.
change, policy 205 or the bio?
If you look at the procedure in 12 for amendments, the procedure for amending the bylaws is.
But we are planning on amending it right now by adding 2 students, so I think
That's true.
Yeah.
we could
Like
do
I
a vote to
said,
cover both.
I'm just asking, because if it's a policy change, then I need to know to get the policy right.
I would like, well,
Correct.
I would like to make a motion that we
Bylaw
change
changes, is that still?
that sentence.
Yes.
Can I get a
Which sentence?
second? The sentence that says I'm gonna say the board
Where's it
chair,
coming from? Where-
I'm reading section 7 under meetings on the bylaw.
He's in the bylaws, yeah.
And it says the board, I would change that to, the board chair may call additional meetings, or the board may call it through consent, an additional meeting through consent, majority consent. So there's 2 ways that an additional meeting could be called. The board chair, if something urgent comes up and we don't have time to check with everyone, board chair can call a meeting, or if the board chair is obstructive.
Alternatively, the board may,
Okay, but if we
Call
make,
special meeting
if we
with-
make this bylaw change, that doesn't talk about, would we need something in that policy 2052 to help clarify what that means in that process?
So we may need to circle back on that one. I feel like I'm not prepared to answer the 205 one because I haven't read through that one. But I think one of our next steps should be make sure that that lines up with the bylaw if we do a change.
Because that one includes emergency meetings.
Okay.
And it has exceptions to giving notice and,
Okay,
and those things.
okay.
So the
and
emergency
emergency
situation-
meetings are statutory as well, like that's,
Yeah.
pandemic was an emergency
Yeah,
meeting, like
yeah.
there's clear delineations on that one.
So can I get a second on that?
I'll-
Can you-
Thanks, Ann.
What's the exact
So-
motion?
Yeah,
I-
that's.
I want to make sure Jennifer.
And speak slow.
I'll speak slow and I'll take my mask for a second. So the board chair, the board chair may call additional meetings, comma, or the board may call additional meetings through majority consent. Is that Annie about
Yep,
right?
that's right.
Okay. So 5-4, we have a meeting and we talk about whatever the subject is, no matter.
Consent or with a majority?
Majority
Okay.
consent. I think it's not fair if one person says we should have a meeting. I
That's
think
right.
we should have at least a majority
And it's
saying.
not a vote, it's consent, which
It's-
is different.
It is different,
Yeah.
yes.
So we're just, like, we're doing a doodle poll, like, I think we need.
Yes.
yeah.
to discuss further, because we're not gonna
Yeah.
discuss over email, we're gonna discuss at the meeting. We need a meeting to discuss this.
And that's when the policy takes effect on written notice and posting on the website and all of that. Once the day that consent is granted, then I think the clock
3
is
days
ticking.
later, whenever we can.
Or if we consent on what the date of the meeting is, I guess that's the key.
Did anybody second it?
Annie did.
Annie seconded it. I guess any further discussion? I think that's a little clarification
Oh,
needed.
I have a question. Well, who's changing all this stuff?
That's what I just asked.
Is it the policy?
Which,
I mean, I
that,
can change it, I can make these changes, if you have it in the notes, I can make the changes.
Because then from here,
Do you have to
Um,
vote on it twice? Or-
yeah, it has to be,
Okay.
it has to be 2 consecutive meetings. And it can, to amend the governance model from Article 3, majority vote.
'Cause I don't know who has access to editing these, yeah.
And the Article 3, majority vote of the members and the licensed
Yeah,
teachers employed
I
by
ain't
the
touching
school.
it.
So the second step after this is that the licensed teachers employed by the school also need to vote.
The licensed teachers, you said?
Yeah,
Okay.
majority of the board and the licensed teacher is employed by the school. And then the authoriser's approval, so Cecilia, if you're, if you have this, then you can also send it to Student Achievement Minnesota.
All right, I can take this on.
Happy
Did you guys
And-
vote?
No, we didn't. So any further discussion on,
well, so no matter what happens, because we already made changes with the number of students, all that goes lumped together, right?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay,
so the grand total changes.
yeah.
okay.
Not individual pieces.
Yeah, no, that'd be 4 months.
Oh, my word.
So do we vote on it tonight, or do we
Yes.
wait for 2
No.
meetings? No, we vote on
We
it.
vote on it.
Vote it
This is
tonight.
our
And then what
grand
happens-
total.
This is the first meeting.
Then all
Then
of
the
the
second
teachers have to vote on it, right?
Yep.
Okay,
And
so we
then-
don't vote again later?
No, it is
No,
a
you've
second.
already approved it. You're getting there.
I think, Michelle, you're saying we do need to vote on
It
it
says
a
an
second
amendment shall
time.
be read and passed at 2 consecutive board meetings, at which time it'll take effect. But I believe, as long as it represents it, we could do consent.
Yeah, so usually on
So
the second
if you
time.
get teachers and
Sam?
Sam tomorrow, we could do it as a consent agenda next week.
And it's listed as number 12.
I think,
Shepherd that along here.
Michelle, did you say 2 consecutive meetings?
Yes.
So if it's not ready by,
Oh my goodness.
if we don't have it ready by Tuesday,
It can't be.
That's not
then we have,
consecutive.
if the resets, our first would be March,
This is my concern.
and then the second one is in April?
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
that's fine.
This is when policy gets in the way of doing business.
And then
So-
it'll be effective in May.
It says 2 consecutive board meetings. It doesn't specify whether it's like regular or not.
So could it be a discussion tonight, voted on Tuesday,
Yeah.
then?
It's a motion we can table.
Then passed
Monday.
at the March
Monday.
meeting?
And
We have another meeting, we have 2 meetings next week, though.
Which is like,
Which is what I was
but
trying
the-
to say, but
Oh,
that's.
so it even counts if it's a special meeting, huh?
yes.
Oh,
But we could
interesting.
table the
No, yeah.
motion.
And take it up, we could do consent approval on Monday. We don't have to discuss it anymore.
Or even just have it be, but just be a very quick
Yeah.
vote. But we could
And that would
table
be
it
our
for
first
now,
vote.
so then we
But-
would have the literal.
But
do,
Cody says,
do we, before we make so after the second vote, it goes into, it's enacted, right? So we have to get the approval from, when does our authorizer and the staff have to vote, between the two? Okay, I don't think we're gonna,
because we have another meeting next Thursday.
So we should
So
table
I-
this tonight.
It's not a big rush.
That's-
I guess what I would say is.
But
let's-
that's what
we
I
can- we
asked,
can
does
take
that
it-
count as a board meeting next Thursday as well? So it would
So we
really
can
be
table it
Tuesday, Thursday.
Until,
Table it till Thursday?
Well, Thursday's
No, we're not
a
gonna do it
different-
on
That's what I was wondering. Thursday's not the
Thursday's
same, right?
No, it's the,
Right.
It's the-
is Thursday labeled a special board meeting?
I don't know.
Yes, I think.
If
you
it's labeled
it.
a special board meeting,
Okay.
Dang it.
it doesn't matter.
okay,
the
can we make the changes now? And then we'll do a reading in March, and then do a reading in April, and approve it both times? And that count?
I think the key question would become is if we table it, can we table it to Thursday? Have a 5-minute thing, or otherwise then we just have to wait. Like then it's just, the special meetings are getting in the way.
Why wouldn't we be able to do
Because also
that?
think about your election timelines, because if you want to add this second student. you
And they
wanna
usually
have
are
them
later.
into this
They're in
and
May.
that.
Oh,
Oh,
they're
they're
in
late.
May.
Yeah, because they're not seated
Yeah.
until, so usually those are in late April.
Okay, let's do it. If Thursday is a special meeting next week, let's have a 5-minute agenda item to do a motion and approve it so that we can get
But
the
let us
clock
make sure
ticking
we are
for that.
tabling exactly what would take 5 minutes
I
to do.
think we should
Yes.
wait. I don't think we should add
But
it to
I think we should wait till
Thursday's
March
our
and,
meeting.
and April.
Okay.
Because
Let's just do
Thursday's
March.
meeting is about interviewing.
Yeah, I
Yes, we're
agree.
And
gonna
like,
be so.
yeah,
like-
that's,
100%.
I think March, because if we approve it in April, then that's still time for the election for the students.
I would just say, I mean, these bylaws have been for 20 years,
Yeah,
right? So we can wait another month. I think as long as we're all aligned on what we want to do, I'm not anxious about it. If we all generally agree on how to call a special meeting, we can kind of operate under this premise for the time being if
Plus,
something happens.
plus,
So-
plus if we wait till April, we can actually have it in writing exactly
Yeah.
Okay.
what it
For
will
the-
look
for the
like. So
election
we're,
process,
know
yes.
exactly what we're approving
So-
both times.
Yeah, that's true. Perfect.
Okay,
So,
but I had a second from Annie. Any further discussion on that
On
clause?
those wording?
Board chair calls a meeting and majority consent to the board. Is any?
I think that would fit all circumstances.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, all those in favor?
Wait,
Aye.
Aren't we tabling it? We can't vote on it.
Oh,
Well, why don't you finish your, because you voted on other items, maybe get it all ready to go and then table it? Then you're all, then it's all ready to go.
we can vote on the changes and then table the approval,
Okay,
right?
that was my concern.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Otherwise we were
But
restarting.
we'll give Jennifer a second to write that down.
But
We're not voting yet,
We
wait.
can't approve it.
We're approving the wording, but then we're gonna make a second motion to
Afterwards.
table
Yes.
the
All the
initial,
changes.
the first reading of the changes for the approval process to April,
March,
March.
2nd April.
Yep, yeah.
I know.
so I just want to, did everyone, was it 9?
Now we're voting on changing the
No.
the special
Yeah,
meeting
cha-
part?
Changing the special meeting part.
Yes.
All those in favor? Eric, are you in favor of changing the special meeting? Okay, so that's 9
Yes,
to
the
0.
words, the verbiage, yes.
Okay.
That's what we're saying.
Then opposed should be 0 and abstain 0. Okay. So I guess before we table it, just any other questions on the bylaws?
Can I raise two tiny things?
Sure.
One is a change that you might want to just pencil in, and one is something you might want to think about for a future discussion. The top paragraph, the second sentence is the principal office of the Math and Science Academy Charter Schools, blah, blah, blah. That's the wrong principal. They're not talking about where the principal sits. They're talking about the main office. So we should change that to PLE, not PAL.
Nice.
I agree.
Yeah, it's wrong. And then, this is a bigger one that you probably want to just save for another time. Under membership, when you talk about, no board member may vote on any matter that could result in personal financial gain or loss. I just wonder if there shouldn't be a broader description of other kinds of conflict of interest. Financial conflict of interest is not the only kind of conflict of interest. So I wonder if that's what that's supposed to be about, and it just might be something to put on a parking lot and think about for later, that you might want more language around there.
What if we just get a suggestion, drop financial? So it's just personal gain or loss? That would be
Yeah.
broader. And it
Well-
would also cover financial.
I know part of this statement, where the first part talks about law, so there might be a I don't know if that wording is coming from a statute.
I will, for myself, I would say I need a lot more time to think about that, because the potential because financial gain is trackable, like it's documented. If you're saying that somebody's gaining some sort of like psychological gain or
Well,
some kind of perceived
special
power
treatment.
gain or something like that, it's
Or
not
even,
necessarily
you
documented.
could say a parent member who's improving their child's education is gaining something from that. So, I mean,
I
what
feel,
what examples were you thinking of? Or-
I was thinking I wouldn't want to have this conversation tonight. I just wanted to raise it.
I feel like the interpretation could be damaging on any way, either end. I mean, somebody could come up with something and allege something for personal, I mean, that's just such a big wide, that's
I mean,
basically
maybe
you
you
could drive a
wanted to
truck through that.
match you have an annual conflict of interest that you sign for the authorizer, so maybe you wanna just, it might be something to talk about on a rainy day when you have nothing better to talk about. It's not that big of a deal, but you know, I don't know. I saw it and I thought, that seems so narrow, it seems like it maybe was intended to be a
Maggie?
broader.
Well, and that statement has been a problem because we are employed
Yeah.
by
Oh, yeah.
this entity. And so for us to vote on contracts or steps and lanes has always been a conversation. We talked about it last year too, and when we met with Eugene, he was like, but then you're a board member, so it's not the same.
But not
like-
board to have.
Right, but, okay, you know what I mean? So I don't know, and he said it is tricky and boards deal with this all the time. So I also wouldn't know how to reword it, but, I mean, that's really part of the issue.
But that part's been in here for so long.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I
But we
think
used
something-
to, but we used to abstain when
we
we would
didn't
pull
have
out
the-
board member contracts.
Yeah.
So the 4 of our contracts would be pulled out, we would vote on them, and then you'd do one of ours at a time. So you'd vote on mine, I would abstain. You would vote on Michelle's, she would abstain from our vote on that, et cetera.
So, yeah, I agree though. Probably a parking lot item because we'd also need
Yep.
to look at what the Minnesota statutes are. We'd
Yes.
have to look at what the template language is. It's very specific, so it's likely that that is template language that's intentional.
So I think that is something that might take a little bit longer. And mine also, I just want to throw it out there because it relates to the other ones. If you look under purpose, we have, the board's purpose is to promote, blah, 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 you know, it goes on. But then it says curriculum, staffing, policy, community involvement, homeschool, communication, budget, everything, right? I mean, and I disagree. That my own opinion is that, you know, we don't do curriculum. At least I shouldn't be doing curriculum. I don't have any reason why I would be able to do curriculum. I don't know why I would do homeschool communication from the budget, from the board. There's a few of these things in there that don't make sense to me, and I just want to share them because that's what's in the other policies. Some of the policies say administration does this cleanly, and then other policies is a little bit more gray. So I'm okay to wait on this discussion right now as we go through the policies. But if it was just me, I've got some red lines in some of those comma delineated sections because I don't think those are board. I'm not sure how they got in there, but they're not necessarily how I see the board. So let's have a discussion as we go through the policies to see where we can kind of say this is cleanly board, this is cleanly out. I'm not saying we have to change the bylaws right now. I'd rather have a discussion focused on the policies.
Agreed.
So-
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, yeah. So any other bylaws?
Well, okay, so do we need to vote on that principle?
Oh, we were gonna
spelling?
table
Oh,
it.
the
Right, we're
spell
gonna-
of the principal?
Which one?
Principal?
Ah,
the
the spelling of principle. Yeah.
Yeah, makes me sad.
We had a motion, well, you can't motion. Anyone?
So, just real quick on that, and maybe is included in this motion. We said the Office of Math and Science Academy Charter School. I don't know if charter school is big C, big S. I think our name may be just Math and Science Academy.
Yep.
So it might be small s, or small c, small s. Could you check that? I mean,
Sure.
when you
Yeah.
just kind of flag the principal.
Can I
Okay.
make that kind of change without?
I
guys
think
voting?
so.
I can, yeah.
This is like spelling.
Yeah,
Should we
it's,
change
it's,
that?
Do you think changing the spelling changes the meaning? I'd feel better if we agreed on that.
No, he's
No,
talking
we
about
can't.
charter
Principal,
school,
the
not
principal.
He's talking
It's
about-
not a person, it's the main is what we're talking about, or
Right.
changing the spelling to LE, correct?
right. But how about
The
Should we
lower
just
casing of
say-
charter school, we don't need to vote
I
on.
don't feel like,
Yeah.
But
should we
maybe
take principal out and just say
I
main?
think principal was a spelling error. I don't think we need to vote on that.
Yeah, if principal's a spelling error,
I think it
that's,
was not intended to be.
Yeah, I don't think it was intended.
Yeah,
You're
because
right.
like
Okay.
we've never, our executive director has never been called the principal, so it's like.
No.
it's
All right,
not-
then we'll include it as a change,
Spelling change.
spelling change, and then we need a motion to table this till the March discussion, correct?
yep.
Can I get a motion?
I will motion to move the bylaw changes to the March
Board meeting.
board meeting.
I will second.
Anybody else like it?
Oh, Sandy seconded. All those in favor? Aye? Opposed? Abstain? Okay, 9-0. So good discussion, guys, making some progress.
We flag somewhere that the bylaw change may also lead to a policy change on the,
205?
yeah,
205.
5.
I
That'll
would
be
just
part,
flag it somewhere.
that'll be part of the discussion in March.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
And then we can maybe hopefully have 205 updated for April, or so they all can go
May
into
or may
effect
not.
together.
Put that in your calendar.
Next up, we had 208, which is the policy on how to develop, implement, and adopt policies. Questions, comments?
So,
Michelle, you want to start?
I shared some of the ideas for standardization
Yeah.
that came up, and I just wanted to know, moving forward, as a board, are we okay with those? That, and I know it seems like a fussy thing, but can I just, are we all okay with all caps and bold instead of the 5 different fonts and the different like strategies?
Yep.
I'm
Are
okay
we
with
all
that.
Please.
okay with left hand justified for the
Please.
revision and
Yep.
adoption?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that you pointed it out,
I'm
thanks.
I'm circling. Are we okay with just consistently changing director to executive director?
Yes.
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 Okay,
We should be doing that.
And then did you want to ask about the gender language?
yes, and then I did include one item that I was going to bring up at the meeting, and I completely forgot, but is it okay as a matter of course for us to change gendered language to there? So instead of saying he or she, we'll just say they.
Yeah.
It usually happens with the executive director. That's
Right.
almost always where you see what, like what he or she sees fit, just say what they see fit. You know, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
as a matter of course, is it
Sure.
okay? Because then as we do the red lines, like, as we do all of these other clerical changes to the policy, just to slowly standardize all of those things.
Isn't that mentioned in a policy somewhere?
What about preferred pronouns?
Yeah, or just because of the whole diversity thing?
I think our staff handle.
No,
There's
there's
no
nothing about,
reference.
there's nothing specifying that we have to, but this is, I just, for our procedural purposes.
Right.
Then we're
I
just
just
going
wanna make
back
sure
and
there
changing
wasn't.
it.
I couldn't
Yeah,
remember.
and it reads cleaner.
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
So like
As
changing
for
that.
policy wording,
So
it's-
all caps title, Times New Roman, left header, director change it to executive director, change like he, she to they. And there.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so that just for all of the future policy updates, I will, we'll just do those.
As we go, yeah.
That will just be part of,
Just the
Review.
standardization.
Got
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
Just a future thinking question. Michelle, if you are not helping us with policies in the future, how does the next person know to do that? I don't want to make a policy on how we
No.
draft policies, but,
Oh, yeah.
well, we have this one. I mean, you could put another bullet point, all caps title, Times New
No,
Roman font.
that one, there never has been, but I definitely can put together like just a little handout for policy. We had talked about it when I first got onto the board 2.5 years ago, that part of the onboarding should be a bit more of a specific officer description. We
Would it
just
make
don't have
sense to
time.
add it to the 208? I mean, this is the policy on how to create policies. Would we just have a little, we suggest this format? I don't know.
No, because then if anybody ever wants to change it, or if you want to go back to like a different executive director title, then we would have to go back and change the policy again. But we can just have it as,
like, here's my little cheat sheet of
yeah, like the
notes. onboarding.
because it would include my annual review stuff,
And when the policies are due to be reviewed and
Yep.
when they come up.
the review calendar.
Like a guide on the formatting guide.
I actually think this question is a bigger question. I think we have some descriptions of each committee, but they may not be really robust descriptions, and maybe better descriptions of how each committee like works, what do they do, what's their purpose. Like, we have some of that, but that could be a review. I think it could be in a description of the policy committee, maybe gets fleshed out a little bit better. Which is just language, it's not
Hmm.
policy language.
On the webpage maybe? or-
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you click on those committees, they
Yeah,
have
They
some
have a little blurb, yeah.
little blurbs, but maybe there's
But
a little bit more.
And I think that also, it would be a good idea, essentially just have like a little onboarding sheet, but have it for the other officer roles as well. So for example, if you're a
Yeah.
secretary, what do you do for a special meeting? How do you set
Right.
up the recording? How does it, like those kinds of things, just those other details that I think can be helpful
Yeah,
for
I
someone
agree.
who's.
I know actually John has a decent onboarding manual for board members, and I didn't do it with
I have
Eric
one.
or Sandy.
I've never seen it.
No, I haven't done it with you.
Sherry Howe used
My
to, Sherry
fault.
Hear you.
Howe
I know.
made them. Sherry Howe would make them, but she retired this year.
Yeah, she's great.
Okay.
So she would make them. The little binders.
Yeah,
Hey, you had a few more, changing the time
Yep.
period.
So, the template, and then the other reason for this one, the other thing I wanted to bring up, in this one, and it's not a huge deal, but I just wanted to think about letter 4C. Not
What
to
are you
change-
on?
Two oh eight.
I'm still on 208. So letter 4C, I just wanted to bring everybody's attention to it because we only have one emergency policy. And so I just wanted everybody to kind of maybe give a little extra set of eyes and extra looky-loo for emergency policies, how they are renewed and how they expire.
Had a question for you on, you say adopted in an emergency. Is the definition of emergency agreed to by the board during the meeting? Like, how are you defining emergency under the policy?
The one that we have right now was already drafted as an emergency policy because it was a result of a national emergency declared.
But to answer the question is we
Yeah.
probably don't have a definition of emergency.
Yeah, so like how would everybody know that this policy is an emergency policy versus a non-emergency policy, unless it's explicitly stated as an emergency policy?
And it is in their
It is.
name, but not necessarily like law. So we don't have a definition of emergency, which we can, check with MSBA, and I can check with Eugene to see if they have a template definition of emergency for
I think
policy.
there's
Actually,
also-
it might be statutory.
I think there is statutory around like endemic or pandemic,
Yes.
like they have some of those things in there.
Yeah, I mean, specifically in the
Yeah.
school,
But
whatever.
I'm just thinking about the difference between the policy adopted in emergency versus an emergency policy. I think those are two different things. So the policy adopted in an emergency, who's defining what that emergency is, that the policy is adopted under?
So the end of it, Eric, the board shall have discretion to determine what
Oh,
constitutes
hi,
an
is
emergency.
that
And I like that because none of us know what'll happen next year. So I like that we have some flexibility to say, we never thought of that, now we have an emergency, so.
Thanks,
And
Dan.
that does actually mirror the statute.
Okay.
Like for calling meetings, they said
Yeah.
you have the ability to declare it, then of course you have to get the documentation.
So it's nothing that we need to do anything with, but simply because we have an emergency policy, and I was thinking that it would be either a consent or agenda or discussion agenda in March or not. But that would be a whole other meeting process, but I just at least wanted us to understand
So-
what happens with an emergency policy.
So it would just automatically expire
Yeah.
unless we discuss it.
Yeah, unless we renew it, yeah.
And
So
we
we'll
can,
have to look at it and decide
Yep,
if we
yep,
want it on the
exactly. So
agenda.
then-
So the timing of it, I just wanted us all to
Okay.
understand, and then Cecilia, Kate, Leela, maybe all four of us can meet, if that's okay. I don't want to make more meetings, but I just want to make sure that that I understand how to function with the emergency policy and just make sure that.
so if we renew the emergency policy, or so, it already came with a deadline, right, or
Yep,
an
'cause it has 1
expiration
year.
date. If we renew it, are we renewing it for a whole year, another year, or how does that part work? And
Then we, in theory, can renew it for a year, or then we would have to go through the action of rescinding the policy. Like a board vote to rescind the policy.
And can we rescind a policy in one meeting?
But if we do nothing, it just automatically goes away.
So it's
Okay.
a timely
Got it.
time-sensitive issue.
Do you know what date it is?
I can double check it, but it was last spring that we.
So is it before or after the March meeting?
I can double check the last, because the last one we didn't make changes, but I have, my last email was from June of '21 to check it to double check the correct version on the site.
So a separate topic, if you look under the development of policies, so 3A, I just want to make sure that we're all aligned. It says I'm reading here, the board policy provides general direction as to what the board wishes to accomplish while delegating implementation of the policy to the administration. So we as a board are setting up the policies and then we hand it over to the administration to implement the policy. That's what that's saying right now.
But you redlined some of this. I think the implementation of was deleted from that, correct? Is that what we're?
For this one, it's just a word order. It's just the word order in the sentence. So it would read, school district policy provides the school board's general direction for the school district while delegating policy implementation to the administration, rather than instead of delegating implementation of
Got it.
policies.
Okay.
So they just,
They reworded it.
yeah,
Who's they?
MSBA,
Okay.
Minnesota School Board Association.
Okay, and then the other one I was gonna say is, C, just, hey, policies can come from the board, employees, students, residents of MSA, but policies should be submitted to the director, which I'm assuming should say executive director.
There's a bunch of spots in here where, because I
And
had
it should
that
be a
same
capital
question.
D.
Okay,
it's-
for review, prior to possible placement on the board agenda. So are we all okay with that? Which, as I read that, the policies need to go to the executive director and then can be put on the board
With the
agenda.
exception of the mandatory annual reviews.
Okay,
Those are all here listed, like, these are the ones every year we have to. So like when we have our annual review list,
okay,
those are the ones that are mandated also within this policy that we have to. So it's
I-
not a proposed review, those are mandatory.
and, yeah, the policy may be proposed, I take that as a new policy,
Exactly,
right?
exactly, but just.
So I hadn't thought of that before, I thought the board could come, but the way, if we follow 3C, we have to go to the director
Yep,
first as
suggest
a
it to
board.
Cecilia, yep.
And say, this is something we think we should do, and then you would review it and say yay or nay, and then we could have a vote, right? Okay,
If it comes that way.
Are we allowed to change superintendent to executive director?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, so like, all of the things.
What about if the executive director has a policy to propose? Is that in here?
Yeah, then it would be on there because the executive director would be able to put it on the agenda.
Okay.
And then,
From this wording, it sounds like the only people that may propose
Yeah,
it
they're
is
not
a
in the
board
list.
member,
Oh,
employee,
gotcha.
student, or resident.
gotcha, we can add executive director?
But isn't executive director an employee?
Yeah.
Yeah, executive.
Okay.
okay. yeah.
And then the notice of the proposed.
What's a resident of MSA?
Yeah, I
Do you
don't
have
know.
people that live here?
There was a rumor.
Just
Wait,
kidding.
people live here?
It's always
That
things
was
He
you
always
live-
pops out of that.
That's why I had a question mark, I didn't know if they meant community member, like the phrasing
what
from
I
the
thought
template was
was
weird, do they
community
mean?
Well,
community?
that might come from what a normal school district where,
Somebody who lives in the district.
right.
So then,
Community
So
member?
it's based on the
Community
model
member sounds
policy, which is
better,
for traditional.
Okay.
yeah, so then.
Change
do
that
we-
to community member?
Can we say or community member instead?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's,
I think that's
I'm
good.
guessing that's what they mean.
It's under the special meeting one, so if you go back.
3C.
so do we need a motion? This one is not a bylaw, so we can do it more cleanly, we can do it in one session, we can make it a motion and change it, correct?
Can I ask one really newbie question really quick here first? So I think you mentioned, I assumed that all of these changes were done by the policy committee, but it sounds like that's not correct. MSBA made some changes to this.
It's both. The
So how
policy.
many, who all can make so we're making changes tonight to some of the stuff, but there's already red lines in here done by either the policy committee or MSBA?
The red lines are always MSBA.
Okay, so does the policy committee have any other updates in here besides?
The
red
policy,
lines?
so like policy committee updates are the ones that I have the notes on, like the standardization language, and a couple of the suggestions that I put in those meeting notes. So policy committee is an arm of the board, it's a board committee. So rather than having us go through the initial legwork of the policy stuff every time,
Yep.
especially if it's a proposed policy change that would require public hearing,
Mhm.
you know, like at multiple public hearings, like the dress code policy did.
Mhm.
So they do that legwork, and then the recommendations go with the teamwork of the admin to the board. And so some of them we can just do as consent agenda versus going through and changing all the red lines manually during our
And
meeting.
how do you know which ones can be which?
Which ones can be what?
Consent agenda versus going through?
It's
line by
defined
line?
as non-substantive, so it wouldn't change the intent or implementation of the policy. So grammar,
Like
if they're
non-substantive
changing it to executive
Per
director.
Minnesota statute or per Robert's rules or per what?
Robert's rules, I don't think would be the correct, statute. So like the red line changes that we have, it's because the statute number changed for the
Right,
state.
Right.
So it doesn't change the implementation of the policy or its wording or its intent, it's just the legal reference changed.
Okay. So there are some changes in
Questions
here.
are good.
There are some things in here that we probably shouldn't like say no to because they were recommended by the MSBA. Some of the red lines are like, yeah, okay, we're hearing them, we're gonna vote on them because we have to, but we're not actually gonna disagree with them because they were made elsewhere. In other cases, it might be one that was done by a board member during a motion or by the policy committee if necessary. Those do require the vote and we do have a say in those.
Yeah, and even for the red lines, if there's substantive changes, like they're recommended, with the exception of the legal references, because those are like a matter of concrete fact. So if it's a legal reference, we change the legal reference, because it's based on, varying the case law. But if there's things in here, so say if we looked at the red line, we're like, we don't care that the sentence is in a different order, the sentence means the same thing, we don't have to make the red line change. You know, like for some of the grammar, like the grammaries and things like that. Because we still get to say if the way the policy is set up, as long as we're not contradicting all the statutes, we have some wiggle room with some of those recommended changes.
Well, for instance, they use that resident, and we're gonna use the word.
Well, and even when the last time we reviewed the medication policy, they had a whole section update about disposal of medication.
Mhm.
So then to do that one, we needed 2 meetings dominantly because we needed to double check with our office staff and with our health aides, you know, to make sure that,
Mhm.
that it was achievable the way that it was written. So if it wasn't, then we may have needed to tweak the description of disposal to allow for our on-site capacity or livability.
I'm still confused at which ones I should care about and which ones I shouldn't.
Other than,
It's in 4B, I think if you read the next one, it's.
yeah, the substantive and non-substantive.
It's already.
So do we need to vote on these?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Or
bring
these
it back.
red
So,
lines go to
so
the
we have,
next?
what would you call it? Formatting is a suggestion. I think we all kind of nodded but didn't vote. We have red lines that you shared, Michelle.
Yeah.
We had also the one on the community versus resident. Would we be able to roll that all into one, or do you guys want to separate those out?
I would, if everybody feels okay with what's there for 208, I think that we could vote to approve based on discussion, and then I can just put the final version in consent agenda as a matter of formality so that everybody can see the final version.
That'd be
Or
great.
just
Yeah,
not
I like to
approve
see
it.
the final version before we approve
Then
it.
we don't even have to vote, just, we discussed it, you'll see the final version.
It'll
That's
be a
okay,
consent
too.
agenda item next week?
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, we can do that, it's perfectly fine.
okay.
I like to see the final version of stuff too, so.
Yep, all right.
I'll motion to approve the changes.
Oh, we're not voting.
Or we're not voting?
Yep, we just
She's
discussed the
gonna do it,
markup.
we'll vote on it. It'll
I'll give
be
you the
part of the
next
consent agenda.
Oh, got
Do
it.
you wanna pull it out on
I
Tuesday?
think the hardest thing
Oh, I thought we
is
were
that
approved.
we should
No, because
upload the
they're-
packet
Got
tomorrow.
it, I'm sorry.
Because she's
We should what?
gonna,
Upload the packet
because we're not voting on
tomorrow.
anything, she's gonna make changes. She'll put it in the agenda.
So that, it's a fair
You don't
point. The
like it,
packet
you
is
can pull
kind
it
of
out
done.
on
We,
consent.
yesterday,
And
right?
discuss.
Well, officially, we were done yesterday and administration worked on it today.
Are we gonna be voting on changes to the policy or voting on the new policy?
Approving the
Policy
policy
as
as
amended?
in the consent
Versus
agenda.
approving the changes to the policy?
So then, do you want to have all of the discussion items moved to the March meeting? It'd be like a mega.
Isn't something about the policies on the agenda
It
already?
is, I tried to write it so we had some flexibility because the
Well, this-
timing didn't work out, right? We didn't have enough time to put it in consent or to put it, so I put it to the end so that we had some flexibility to discuss some more if need be.
I mean, we can
it-
swap out we can pop up the packet now, which is the agenda with the links. We can put it on the website and then we could put these in at the end, anytime before our Tuesday meeting.
Do we have time? Because we don't need to rush it. If you need some time to clean it up,
Monday's President's
then we do it
Day.
in March.
Well, how about this? Why don't we can add it to the end for, we'll just do it, I can't say that I can for all of them, because it'll depend on how many changes there are.
Yeah,
But like for this one, the changes are relatively minor,
Yes, it's on.
and I don't think,
so it is there. I mean, 208 is there. It's listed on the discussion and
It
approval
just doesn't
section.
have the new language.
It doesn't have the new, so I guess,
But that's okay, it's probably okay.
yeah, if we can,
And we'll have it after the
we
fact.
can do that.
yeah.
Otherwise, we do it in March. How about that?
I
Okay?
think that's really okay that we won't have this new language in the packet. We can,
It's a happenstance, like it just, the way the calendar worked out and the review
Yeah.
worked out.
Okay. Can we move on to the next one, everyone? You guys, is that 209? Is that
Yeah.
So 209, Code of Ethics. So let's, questions, comments? Check my own notes here.
wait, why are we?
Where's
doing
209? I don't see 209 in here.
I have to.
It's the next one on the workshop.
Oh, it's not titled, oh, here it is, there it is.
209
It's a
Code
Word
of
document,
Ethics.
not a PDF. In the-
I grabbed it right off the website as a PDF. 209. Did you have any red lines for that one, Michelle? or no?
No,
Oh, no, okay. So,
and the other one, the technology 52, that one did not, policy 524 did not have any red
okay,
lines either.
okay. So, questions, comments? Otherwise, I'd like to go through, this is quite a nice summary as the board, right? I think if we talk about board training, it would be nice that we start with this every time we bring in a new board member to make sure we know what we're signing, because otherwise, you just kind of listen to an oath and you sign it, right? But actually, this goes through quite 4 pages of things that we will do and we will not do, right?
It's almost their job description.
Yeah, yep, yep.
For B5,
Yeah.
should that say executive director?
Yes.
And
So-
6 should also say
Yep,
executive
all of them.
director? So there are some changes that we would want to make to this.
Yes. And then the other question I had, there's a couple of grammar things. So on D1, once you've listed out the school name entirely, you don't need to list it again, so it should
Correct.
just say MSA. And then on,
Do we have to list it once for the first time in each policy, or can we just have MSA in
Each
all our
policy.
policies?
No,
Okay.
so it's up on the first in the purpose, it says of the Math and Science Academy, and then in parentheses, it says MSA, Board of Directors, BOD. From then on, you should only be referring to it as what you put in the parentheses.
Got it.
and then if you
You should
look,
teach English.
I'll work
if you
on
look
it.
at E9,
Bingo.
I wanted to know
me a
if you
second.
all believe, because it talks about proper referral according to chain of command, should we add VC policy 103? So they would,
Is that the chain of command one?
yes,
Oh, okay.
the chain of communication should also be changed. It's not command.
Okay.
So E9,
E,
so it says to, the they are presented in writing to the whole board for proper referral according to the chain of, so,
E8.
It's 8. I don't know
Well,
why.
I have.
oh, mine says 9.
Mine says
Mine
8.
is, mine is 8.
Mine also
Mine
says
says
9.
Mine says 8.
Are you in the Word one?
Yes.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
That's a little
7.
squishy. I'm doing the PDF
So I'm
one
doing
off the
PDF as well.
website.
And you have the PDF.
I think so.
And she printed it for you? But
Oh,
she's-
your version isn't numbered.
Now, this was in the packet, then she printed these ones.
The first one isn't. So then-
That's the PDF, somehow, the one that's not numbered should be numbered. That's your number
So all
one.
the director responsible.
Oh, hold the director responsible, got
Yeah.
it.
Something
So-
in converting to PDF, it
It went
deleted-
wonky.
Oh,
And then,
I see.
okay, so
Okay.
then it goes all the way
It
to.
deleted one of the angry.
Okay, so-
This is one.
So what, one change, I guess it wouldn't be substantive, is correcting that part for the PDF.
That's what I'm saying, like, they're just,
Okay.
they just need to put that.
Right.
Right.
There's some that haven't been reviewed in a long time. So for that one, is it like that on the website too, Cecilia?
I got this from
What?
the board
Is
site.
it like that on the website too?
I look at
The website has no number for
I'm in the Google file, so I'm
Yes,
in the Word
yes,
one.
it's like that.
It's like that, okay.
That's correct.
So, again, I'll put a little like star there.
Okay?
PDF converting, sometimes. So then, my question became for that one, because it's specifically talking about referring complaints, do we then want to add in C policy 103, which is the policy for complaints?
That would be helpful.
Fine.
I think so.
Yeah.
Also, because we're doing electronic PDFs, this might be too much for you. Can we make it so that the files have an embedded link that brings us to the other policy? Or is that too much?
For right now, yes, it's too
Okay,
much.
okay.
But that's a
But that's a
great.
good idea.
But it is an excellent idea, and I love it, just for, not right now.
Okay, that's fine.
No, I like
What
that
section are
idea.
we on right now?
We were on
E.
Rule
E.
9E.
And then
E.
your
Nine.
8 is 9.
Okay. Can I actually go back up to 4?
E4?
Yes. Consider the recommendation of the director in hiring all employees. Does that mean that the board hires all employees? Because the director's only recommending?
Yeah, the recommendations, there's a lot, I would myself read that as yes.
Yeah.
Is that
Well,
correct?
Why is the board hiring all employees?
I thought we voted on.
Yeah,
We voted on.
in the past, we've always voted on their contracts.
And it's in the,
But we don't do any interviews. We don't, I mean, as the board, right, we don't sit. So we take the administration's,
Right,
I mean, the
right.
administration's the
It
one
is
that's
a-
responsible for it based on the previous policy we talked about.
That's the recommendation.
Sorry?
Yeah, so you consider their recommendation because they're the ones that have been doing the headings.
Consider the recommendation.
So this is always an interesting one to me, and this, it happens in other places too, not just at MSA. By the time the contract comes to you, the person's already been hired and signed a contract. So essentially what you're approving is, it's a formal, it's a formality, you know, but you wouldn't at that point say, no, we don't like that principal that you already hired, you know? So because of the way hiring happens, it's always gonna be after the fact when you approve it. So it's a little bit awkward. And this is the way it was in St. Paul too, like the HR department would come with a list of 50 hires and it's on the consent agenda and you just approve the whole thing, you know? It's really, I think it's in your finance role, it's essentially approving the expenditure, not the person. So it's always been a little bit weird, not just here, but, you know, in other places,
'Cause, yeah,
because it's after the fact.
HR does, you know, because we're paying people, does overlap with the board responsibility. So yeah, that makes sense that, because yeah, basically when we're approving the contract, we're approving that we will be paying them. So.
It's just your checks and balances.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
it's
say approve
necessary.
or,
Yeah, it's
it just says consider.
Consider.
That's kind of a weak word, if you ask me,
Yeah.
and it also raises some questions in my mind, like how are we considering this? So I agree,
What
I
is
think
what is
the
the purpose
financial
of
part and the budget part is clearly in the board's camp, right? We're responsible for
right.
the finances of the school, that's what we approve and disapprove. So if you come in and want to pay $1 million to somebody, we may consider that, right? You know,
Right,
and
right.
consider that strongly as an alternate, but it would be nice to be a little more clean there, because we may have some sticking points in the future, and we have had some in the past, where administration may come and feel it's within their rights, right, to hire somebody to do a role, and the board may feel otherwise, and so,
Yep, and I think even when it comes to like, let me see, the resume or something like that, it's like, where does your
Yeah.
role stop? Like,
Could-
we already did all of that screening and, you know.
could we say consider the financial implications that the recommendation of the director hiring? I don't know. That's a little bit
Yeah, I
cleaner.
don't even know what the right language would be, I know that it's always a weird one and it's not just weird here.
Yeah.
I think another thing we have to check of is where did this language originally come from? Because it's from, if,
MSBA.
Yeah, it's
It's the
MSBA.
template language from.
if it's from them, can we really change, how much leeway do we have to change it?
You always can
Yeah, you can
change,
change
they're just
anything.
recommended, but you do have to know that if you had a problem and a lawyer said, well, show me your policy, and you have something really wonky, they're gonna say, you know, you guys screwed up.
I mean, we kind of take it that it's been tested across every school that uses this, which is a lot, not perfect, but.
I think it's more the
solid assumption.
interpretation of it, like how do you interpret it, and, you know, basically it's that formality, that checks and balances, like Jennifer, it's a formality.
Can I bring us back to section B? We're going almost backwards here, but I just want to quickly go through these. This is what the board member I will, and for those that are not having it in front of you at home, focus on education policy as much as possible. Remember, my responsibility is to set policy, not implement policy. I highlighted that one because that's kind of a gray area, right? But we are setting the policy, and the administration is not explicit here, should implement it. Consider myself trustee of public education, do my best to protect, conserve, and advance its progress. Recognize my responsibility through the actions of the board as a whole is to see that MSA is properly run and not to run MSA, it says myself. Is that okay to use my? That's not gender.
It's individual. Yeah.
Because you're
so
saying
myself.
I will at the top.
I will, okay,
As a board
okay.
member, I will.
So I'm okay with it, but I want to make sure we're still gender.
Yep, that's not gender.
Work through work through MSA director, and that should say executive director, not over or around the director, and delegate the implementation of the BOD decisions to the director. So I think this is quite clear, you know, like 6 bullet points of how the board, that's our charter, if you will, that's what we're supposed to be doing as the board. But I would like to throw it out, do we have a different understanding, is there something that's not written correctly? Do we have a different, because we really need to be aligned on these kind of 6 points if we're to kind of function as a whole. I'm totally fine if we vote differently on different subjects, but we need to kind of understand what our role is. At least we should agree on what our role is, then we can decide based on our conscience how we want to vote. And this goes back to the original question, Jeff, that, on the agenda, which is, do we all have the same understanding of what it is we're supposed to be doing? Because if we don't, then we may vote differently, and I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right because we're coming at it from different angles. I think as long as we understand or we agree what our purpose is, we can vote however we want to vote. And I think no one can call that into question. But we did have a question called as to how we voted. And I think some of it goes back to what's our role versus what we think our role is sometimes. And I'm just guessing. That's why before we jump to the quick rebuttal on allegations or concerns, let's make sure we're all aligned there, and then we can take it moving forward. So I'm just throwing it out there as a point of discussion. Jennifer, did you raise your hand?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, no, anything to add? Just teasing me.
And I don't think that there's anything in here that it seems fairly straightforward. But again, setting policy then means that the policies we set, so when we're looking at 603 and 616, that it's clear what would be the administrative role, and then what do they bring back to the board.
Yep. I think we need to clear that up a little bit, because I think there's a few sentences that if you put them together, they're saying different. They're saying
So, and
different
again,
things.
through the director, not over or around, through the director still includes board committees, because the admin team is on board committees, so I think that that's perfectly fine. And then implementation of the decisions, that is reiterating number 2.
Yeah, we said
Set
earlier.
versus implement.
So can I raise a couple of questions about this, number 5 here? Because this is an area where I felt like at the January board meeting, there was some of that work through the direct, working around the director. Because it was a surprise to me that we were going to vote on the schedule change and the project lead the way. That was a surprise. And I mean, there's been a couple other things like this, and so I think it's because of the confusion. 2 times this week I've heard about expenditures that I didn't know anything about. One was I got an invoice to approve that we're paying the travel expenses of one of the candidates. I hadn't known anything about that. And another was we're paying Jenny Abbs from Bergen to come and do finance training, which is great, but I have to manage the budget. So, those are 2 little things that I'm like, I'm sure nobody thought twice, but it's like, isn't that, anyway. The big one was, this is partly, there shouldn't be surprises, but, I don't know. This is the one that feels like we're not on the same page, especially when we look at those other 2 policies that you mentioned, then we get, it's confusing for me as an administrator, and it's a hard enough job as it is, that I think that it's a lot to ask of an administrator to do a job where it's on quicksand, the rules of the game aren't clear, So, I'm glad we're talking about it.
Well, and you raised a good issue, and then I want to step back and go, is it an issue with the policy? Is it an issue with communications? Is it an issue of misunderstanding, that someone does something, you came from a different background and we're a different school. So obviously, you were familiar with something else and we're familiar with something else. So we look at this and there are no bright lines. And we've just been at it for a relatively short period of time. So I don't want to change a policy based on necessarily one situation. I kind of want to understand, how did we get here?
And I'm
So,
not
I
asking
mean,
for a
you're-
change for
So this
this.
is the,
Yeah, I'm not asking for a change.
no, I know. I'm just kind of having this discussion, if you were surprised, I think about this and go, well, why were you surprised, right? I mean, I'm like, was there something we could have done, we should have done? Is there a process that
I
we
think
all followed that wasn't written and wasn't communicated, or you didn't, I don't know how we
I
got
think
there.
it's looking at the combo of these other couple policies, so it'd be nice if we could all kind of lay them out and
Yeah, it's
look at them
hard,
across
yeah.
them,
But can
That
we,
might be true if we all started and said, hey, you looked at a particular policy, I looked at that policy and we kind of clashed, but we all kind of also did what we do because of our experience.
Yes,
And
and
we end
then,
up getting there, it's, so it's a policy issue we all looked at the policy before you did something, we did something.
I do
But that
think-
actually didn't happen. It's now we're, after the fact, looking at the policy, trying to understand what happened. That's the
The-
difference.
The article that you found about the maturity of a board going from like a new charter school to adolescence to,
Yep.
this fits with this task you charged me with to help us have the growth mindset to expand. And I do think that there is a difference between a brand-new charter school where teachers have come together to
Yep.
create something and where we're trying to head to. And,
Right.
you know, I mentioned before some growing pains with the policies that, or maybe the practices like Jeff said, this is what we've always done. Maybe we're at a point now where that doesn't work anymore.
So, and that's actually a good example. So in that document, let's just say, there might have been 4, I can't remember, different places, in terms of maturity of the board. And we travel through those at different times in the life cycle of the school. And at one time, we might have been at 4, and we may be at 3 sometimes. I see us, just because of all the transitions, we're at 1. We're still learning, you're still learning, and we can't expect to draw bright lines between, oh, that's implementation and operational versus, policy. We're still learning that because things have shifted and continue to shift, and we're trying to, in this year, rebuild it to get to 4, but we're not at 4. That's a nice goal. I'd love to be here at 4 tomorrow in May or whatever. We're not there. We step back a little bit because there are a lot of things that are happening and we're not all familiar with. I mean, everyone in the schools at different levels of understanding and familiarity of the school itself.
Annie, did you have something?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, like, we did have, some research in my head, like, well, it was usually something we did do is to have contracts brought to us, or this is something we have done as a board and I was on the board, a long time ago. And then, Cody brought up, because they're like, why is it that I just expect this? As you go through, there's not really a clear delineation of what we should do. But then you do read like the interim, which I worked on the personnel committee, the interim director's job description, and it's pretty clear that, ensures that the expenditures are within limits approved by the board. And I didn't know, for me, I voted for it, but again, it's like, I didn't know how we were gonna pay for this, how is this sustainable, and all of my knowledge, there were things here that we don't know all of, you know what I'm saying? There's things like ensure appropriate staffing and recommendations, staff contracts to the board. This is something that we've done, and this is in your interim director contract. And then to jump a leap and actually use the word unethical, that's just not a misunderstanding. That's pretty strong language, and that was kind of shocking to actually use that. And it wasn't just from you, it was also from another staff member and through email. And nobody said anything about it. And I find that, like, that's different than like we're trying to figure it out and get to 4 versus unethical behavior.
Yep, I do want to clarify my email, and maybe it was more abrupt than you would prefer, said, I'm not sure that we followed this policy. I didn't accuse anyone of being unethical. I said, I'm not sure that we together followed this policy when I looked at it. And primarily I'm looking at, a few things on this list, but one is work through the director, not over or around the director.
And yet we have a contract that says we should be bringing things to the board. That's not you, it's not unethical, that's bad. We need to fix this.
So just for tonight's discussion, because I think it's fantastic we're talking and it all should be talked out openly. On 209, which I know there's other documents, people are bringing in other things, it's a little hard for me to keep up with all the different emails and different documents. But can we agree that 209 is written correctly, and then we as a board need to follow 209? If there's anything wrong, I would say now's a great time to say this is not right. Otherwise, I'm assuming that we've had the discussion on 209. This is our kind of marching orders. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And then we can kind of move on to some of the other policies where I think there is some ambiguity that needs to be cleaned up. We have about 20 minutes left. So I don't want to cut discussion short, but I think we have a lot of documents that we were able to generate here, and I can't speak to all of them.
With regard to this one as well, as we move in, same thing. The non-substantive changes of the grammar and template stuff I will do.
Okay.
So when you see it, you'll see this one, but it's with those
Executive
standardization
director.
items.
I didn't have any other changes. Anyone else on 209? So
The
I
only
don't
one I
mean to cut
had-
it short, but just to move us on.
Yeah, the only one I had was A7. It says school district, it should say MSA.
Okay.
But again, I consider that non-substantive, but just in case.
Okay.
So red line changes will be added to the consent agenda in February or March?
Red line changes, well, these two I can get in there. So we're
208 and 209?
Yep.
We think
So
we
right
can
now we
get?
have
Okay.
208 and 209.
Okay, okay. We're making
And
progress.
You know, I took this off from the actual website, I just want to be clear. I printed it today off the website, and you have different numbers, so where did?
Oh,
it's
we
different-
figured it out.
Yeah, we figured it out. It's-
Okay.
When it, the
So
conversion of
where is
PDF.
this housed? Is this on the drive?
Yeah, it's.
So that's on the drive versus?
Yeah, it's just with the conversion of PDF, one of the
Gotcha.
nested sets.
I just want to make sure. Yeah, okay.
So a process check, 603, 616, 524.
I,
524?
524, I didn't have any red lines, and it's just an
Okay.
annual review. So I can do consent on that one next time.
Okay, so 603 and 616, are we okay to take them in that order? Okay, let's start with 603. 603.
Yeah, do we just want to get knock
Is 524 just red lines? Was that?
524 doesn't have any red lines. It's
Oh.
just an annual review.
Okay.
And it has a whole bunch of things about technology and study hall. If you
Yep.
want to do a full policy review of that one with the teachers to talk about how they address technology and study hall, it's a whole other matter, which I'm totally fine doing.
It may be time, it's kind of
It's
an
an
outdated
awkward-
policy.
It is, it is. So if
it
you
was
want-
last revised in 2015,
Yes.
and,
MP3 players and things like this,
Yeah.
right? So
No,
it's-
there
Yes.
definitely is. So I was looking, and I had entirely forgotten that that one was this month, otherwise I would have.
MySpace.
So.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's like, remember, what was the one last year that
It had
had
MySpace,
MySpace
too.
and stuff on it?
Yeah.
that we had
Yeah,
to
it still has a
So-
MySpace.
For
yeah.
this one,
using
honestly,
Java,
if
too.
we want,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the right Robert's
CompuServe,
rules
I
of
dial
it,
up through CompuServe.
because it's on this, like the policy discussion, but it doesn't say decision. So if 524, if our policy discussion on 524 is that it needs further edits from policy, and I can bring it back in like April.
It's fine, I think.
I
that's
think
okay.
it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Let's
I
do that.
mean, yeah,
Let's
if
spend the
we have
time on
my
603.
space on here, I think that's,
It's long, yeah.
Definitely,
Yeah.
take some photos for posterity, that's something.
So,
for the
curriculum.
students at home.
Oh, and
development.
a side note, just
Right?
as a clarification too,
Facebook.
I do believe we did approve that travel expense last meeting with Lisa Anderson. She had asked for funds for travel expense.
We can take it quick. So I, as the board chair, decided not to call a special meeting to revisit that. I emailed Lisa when she asked and said, we have some expenditures. I said, the board approved a certain amount of expense. You manage that. And so that's kind of how I did it. So she shouldn't have gone over what was already approved on the board for that process. So I used a little bit of executive decision to say, just please stay within the approved amount. So as long as it's under that amount, we'd kind of approved that, under that auspice, if you will.
Yeah.
So sorry if it kind of
It was
blindsided you.
surprising because it was for advertising and this was for travel and it's just
Yeah.
not common to pay
Yep,
candidates
that's
travel
fair.
expenses in
I-
education
when-
at all.
I'm not defending myself, but we had quite a few different requests for different meetings and different topics, and that one was like, that's a pretty small one compared to some of the other ones we were going through, so I just said, I'm not gonna call a special meeting for that.
No, I totally understand. It's just,
Yep, and I think I can do better in the future, letting you know that this is where it'll, yeah, okay. So 603, comments, questions, concerns?
On this one, I did want to point out on 603, letter 3D does say that periodically presenting recommended modifications for BOD removal or review and approval. So,
What?
3D?
yeah, so under responsibility for curriculum development.
Oh, okay, so
3,
So if you look under, so Roman numeral 3,
Yep,
Roman numeral 3.
next page, letter D.
yep.
D, yeah.
Students identified as not reading at grade level by the end of kindergarten?
No.
That's what I
that's
got.
what we're looking at.
That's what I have.
Not on mine.
No.
For
No.
603?
Oh my gosh,
Are
seriously?
you looking at the red line? The red line is the whole policy. Look at the MSA version.
I'm looking at the red line.
Yeah,
The red line is just, it just
603.
shows the statutory.
So that's what, that, they chop off what's not, or you chop off what's not applicable to us, right?
What about kindergarten?
Like kindergarten.
What is yours?
They have the master, some of them have the master one from the school board.
Okay.
I'm sure.
I just put up the
you-
statutory red lines because I haven't
Got
had
it.
a chance to make all the red lines yet. So D, the director shall be responsible for keeping the board informed of state mandated curriculum changes as well as recommended discretionary changes and for periodically presenting recommended modifications for BOD review and approval. So under Project Lead the Way for myself, that was kind of where I saw that.
Yeah.
And I have a question on that because that's, I think, part of the crux of it is, was that an admin or was that a board? The director's responsible for keeping the board informed.
And for periodically presenting recommended modifications for board of director review and approval.
Yeah.
So this
it's
is where it-
informing and also
It's
looking
not
for
on
approval.
both sides, it's small for it.
It's both.
If you look at the whole thing, keeping us informed of state mandated curriculum changes, as well as recommended discretionary changes, and for periodic, so there are three different subjects
Yeah.
in the same. So just like looking at it and thinking about it, when I was reading it, I saw it as three separate, like, keep us informed of state changes, recommend discretionary changes, like minor changes, and if we have modifications, which would be more significant than a discretionary change, review and approval.
But periodically presenting. So
Indeed,
if
periodically.
she had presented that next year after the modification already taken place, then it's still periodic. Like, what's the definition of
Indeed,
periodic?
that is the good question.
And also,
That's
I
really
don't-
ambiguous.
Discretionary isn't minor. Discretionary is something different than
Yeah.
minor.
So it may be good to have those definitions included.
I think so.
I also, I'll just throw it out there, I mean, I don't feel like I am in a position to vote on curriculum changes. I personally feel like I don't have any credentials
I'm not
that would
an expert,
justify
yeah.
me to be able to say this curriculum or that curriculum. I'm relying 100% on the administration, which we pay a decent amount of money for the school to have experts in this area. So I
But
feel like.
the board also has 4 teachers on here that I hope are experts on curriculum.
I don't know. I mean, that they would have more education experience than a parent or a community member. We have 5 of the 9 that have no requirements for education. How could we overrule? I'm just a question. We can, as a group, decide to overrule the curriculum because for nothing other than we just don't like it.
So
That
here's
doesn't
an
feel right.
example that happened, well, actually it continues to happen, is when we spend, $100,000, $50,000, right? $100,000 in 2 years on changes in math curriculum. So, that impacts budget. I remember some of the questions we asked were like, okay, does this involve training? Why are we doing this? Or whatever, right? Just like checks and balances. And we approved it because of the amount of money and to make sure that it fell within the cycle. And those are some of the conversations. Now, if they would
That was 2 years
necessarily
ago,
said, yeah, 2 years. So if they would have necessarily said, well, we do it because we teach it one way versus another, my question was, are we actually changing in teaching? Not like, why are we moving? It's like, is that a change? And how much more we have to pay for training and all that other stuff? Those are the questions that I think a board should actually ask. Because fundamentally, it changes the way our school operates as a STEM school. Another example would be, someone says, hey, changing from STEM to STEAM, that could be considered a curriculum issue, but fundamentally, that changes the face of our organization. In some, not everything. Should the board actually be involved in that discussion? Yeah. You want to draw a bright line and say, hey, you're not supposed to, or you don't have to approve it. I'm not sure I know that question or answer that question, but it feels big enough that we ought to be looking at it. So instead of, trying to draw bright lines, I feel like going in a direction of, instead of siloing ourselves, stop building these walls and, collaborate and work together on this. It just feels like we're building walls. And if we had more time to work with each other, a year from now, all this would be a non-issue. A lot of this would be a non-issue.
One question I have,
So-
because what it sounds to me, Jeff, when you talk about this is, if we just knew you better or trusted you more, then we would let you make those decisions, that kind of thing. So it's like, maybe, we're just getting to know you, that kind of thing. And so
A little bit, yeah.
the question is, And I think this does go with this growth mindset, this getting ready for expansion. What do you want the role of the administrator to be in MSA? What do you want your administrators to do? I think that needs to be clear. It is very hard to do the job when it's not clear. And you do have talented administrators here. You maybe haven't always, I don't know, I'm not gonna say that, but it's possible. But you have talented, well-trained administrators who it's their job to be instructional leaders. I sent you a link to a long article from the Wallace Foundation, and I probably have buried you guys, I apologize. It says what principals do, so what the Kaden, Leela, and Steve roles do, not my role, because I'm the superintendent, as instructional leaders, can be so powerful. We don't have the ability to do those things that are described in that article because, well, number one, we don't have time to meet with the staff, but because of this kind of confusion. So if you want your administrators to be successful at doing their jobs and you're clear about what they should be doing, that's the question. Right now, I think some of these policies, this one and then the one that's after it to look at, are confusing. So I just want you to know that if you want good administrators to help take this school forward, it has to be clear what you want them to do. You know?
I wish I could wave a magic wand so we could achieve perfect clarity. And I don't know if it could be done in a short period of time, let alone done ever. So, yeah, you can describe it as get to know each other, but I mean, it's all of the above. It's everything you've said, it's some of the stuff I've said, and we haven't had the time to achieve all that. You ask a very great question. I don't know how to get there.
If
Okay?
you hire
Now,
us.
hang on. I'm just saying, I don't know how to get there, and maybe the one piece of it is, I'm not sure anyone knows how to get there unless we ask the right questions and work together. And what you're suggesting just sounds like you build a wall, this is what I do, this is what you do, and that's just the way it is. And that does not feel right to me. To me.
I don't
okay?
think that's necessarily what it is, though.
I'm just suggesting it.
Yeah.
To me, that's what it feels like. If it feels different to you, I respect that, but I'm telling you, that's how it feels like to me. So frankly, I'd love to meet in the middle. I wish, we could rewind some of this, and then some of this might have worked out better, because then we learn from this situation. But I just can't also see, well, leave it to me, because I know how to do it. That doesn't feel right to me.
I think to a certain extent, it boils down to trust. Like, when you start the dance, the relationship, you should start in a position of trust. And that trust is complete, explicit, no holds barred, because you got the position because you were qualified for the position. Therefore, it's not a wall, it's an actual important part of the journey where you've already established what those walls are, and then you let them in. And there's no getting to know each other. It's about, here's the policy. We trust because we hired you to do the job that you've been asked to do, and now do it. And it's up to you to break that trust with us. So it starts from a position of 100%, not 50%, trying to get to 100%. You start at 100 and then you work back if mistakes are made or if trust is broken. I think for me, the policy here starts with these words mean we don't actually trust our administrators because we need this periodic review. I'm not saying we'll change the policy, I'm just saying it starts from a position of 80% and not 100% with the administration.
Agreed.
Well, and I have felt the all or nothing in this. I felt like, we aren't doing a block schedule, we voted against, a block schedule, voted not to have it, and there is no coming back from it. It is black and white, we are not gonna have Project Lead the Way, we're not gonna have, and I just think it's too bad, because I think both ends we're suffering. Because now, we can't do Project Lead the Way, we can't have training for block schedules, it's either this or nothing, and I feel that's what happens when you know what I mean? I feel sad about that. That's just how I feel. This is where we're at with this right now. There is no like, now, like we were saying, we're trying to spend this money on COVID, this COVID money wisely, but now it's like, well, and not buy stupid stuff. But now it's like, but now we can't have it, so now we have to spend on the stupid stuff. Why can't we like, I don't understand why this is an all or nothing decision. That's my thing either. Why it can't be, you know what I'm saying? So the trust part too is, okay, well, I don't know. That part bothers me because that all or nothing, how can you have, they feel scorned. I feel sad because it's all or nothing, so how can it be all or nothing? How can we can't tease some of this out and put, you know what I'm saying?
Which means nobody wins.
That's where I feel
Yeah.
we're at right now.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
But that's the attempt of tonight, I think, at least to start that discussion of how do we work together as a team. I liked some of that came out from some of the discussions with the teachers, even just saying how do we, it's not led by any one group. It shouldn't be the board is leading. It shouldn't be the teachers are leading, and it shouldn't be them. We're all doing the school together, right? So we got to figure out how do we do that. I like the analogy of trust. I feel like we as a school have chosen to put an extremely powerful and talented administration team in, and then we're almost handcuffing you by saying everything needs to periodically come back through the board because we don't trust you. We'll give you a little bit of a leash, but not very much. And that doesn't feel right to me. If we wanted that, we could save a lot of money and have an operations director, right? One. And the board could do the administration's job.
I think it kind of goes back to
a
the
lot of money.
policy governance that I had brought up very early on. If you look at some of those, it's the board policy, but then it's the limitations of the executive. Like the only things that get limited are the things that would be bad. The things that are illegal or the things that are against policy or whatnot. Outside of that, there's no limitation. So it gives an opportunity for that executive to be strategic
Well,
and
the
assertive.
problem with that is, like, the budget.
Well, the budget still sits with the board.
We own it.
Approved
The-
budget
the
is
board-
Right, within an
nobody's
approved
challenging
budget,
it.
but there's, okay, so if we're talking about like reviewing curriculum and changing it, if the recommendation requires changing of funding, then that's the opportunity for the board to change how
Sure.
the budget was.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So there's like it's, I don't know if it can be quite that cut and dry because,
I think that's a
There-
perfect example.
there are times, we've had times where we have revised our budget. So, and part of that was for curriculum, so I think part of that's, and part of this is, the board meetings are great, is one of our public forums, or public things. A lot of parents are watching, they watch our board meetings to know what's going on, so these are also areas for, getting public input and because parents should have a say in, like the curriculum their children are working in. That's why we have parents on the board.
But if we use it just as a quick example, let's rewind the clock. Administration comes forward and says, here's a curriculum change. Best they're doing to execute the board's direction, let's say, if you will. And here's the implications to the policies that may or may not need to be changed. Here's the implications to the budget that may or may not need to be changed. Those are two things that I think we all, 209 is saying we own these, or 208, sorry, we're setting up these. So if that would have been the discussion, here's the data that says we should move in this direction, I'm periodically updating you, what have you, that's a different discussion than
Absolutely.
the board feeling, some of the board, some of us, we should be talking as a board, we decided as a board, right? So we all have to kind of own that, we voted as a board to undo that. So I think we might have had a different discussion then. If we agreed on our, I want to call it lanes or roles, however you want to call it. If we disagree on that, or if we have some people that are thinking, it's over here or it's over there, of course, we're going to have a different of opinion. And I feel like our next administration that comes in, the full-time one, they need to know they have our support, the board support, right? If they come in, why would they come in if they don't get to do anything? I mean, they're coming into a school that's fantastic, hoping that they can even make it better. But if they just come in to do what the board says, I feel for those folks that are applying. We had 3 solid candidates, right, that came in. Was it this week or last week? I can't remember. Whenever we did that. But was it this week? It seems like so long ago. Yes. You know what I mean? So I want to give them the best opportunity to succeed because our school should be succeeding with using the talents that we have from them. So just something to think about. I know we're running short on time here.
And again, to your point there, the other elements that we look at in that same policy too, is as a board, we look at, we represent with our board hat, all of the groups. And so those periodic reviews can also be a point for us to say, you haven't, like your idea A is awesome, but there's still some community questions, there's still some community concerns, there's still, so is there a way that we can flesh this out? Can we have more research? So that's a part of it. It's not just an automatic that you bring it, it's not that no decision ever gets made, but rather we can also act as a moment of like, oh, hey.
So I like it. I think we can all bring different voices to it, but I think where it gets a little bit squishy in my mind is if it's approved. Do you know what I mean? Like, if Cecilia and I have a discussion about we're going this way, does that sound like, we will have meetings once a month or twice a month to sit down. I mean, that's a normal kind of conversation, but to bring it to the board and ask for approval is different. And I think we're asking for both, in this D here. And it's confusing for me at least, what we're asking the administration to do. And I feel for them feeling a little bit powerless to do what we've asked. So it's 8 o'clock, that's what we agreed to in terms of timing. Not done yet, I guess my thought is we started a good conversation. I think it was great to have some of this open and out. We had agreed to amend the agenda at the end to have a quick discussion about next steps. Let's do that if that's okay. And then 6:16, can we wait on that one? I think we need more time to.
It would depend. Cecilia, do you think if I was able to schedule with the policy committee, again, because we were in the middle of looking at this one, so especially if
It's a big one.
Yeah, so especially if it's not for February, because I don't think that we'd be able to get a meeting I have students who are already asking for office hours, so
It looks like it's been revised in May historically, so.
This thing came through and it needs work.
Yeah, so would it be okay for 6:16 if we had another policy meeting, focusing specifically on this one and potentially at least using a reference point of the world's best workforce mandate? Because there's some points in here that we were trying to figure out, like, who's really doing what?
Yeah.
And 603 together, so we're consistent across the two.
Yeah, definitely. So then, would it be possible, I am so sorry, but if we've got a couple policy heavy months, because there's a backlog. And they just gave me it was a zip file of the red lines.
I don't know.
I would like to take a stab at talking that one through with the policy committee, which is meager. It's not a good, robust committee yet, but anyway, we could give it a shot.
So then, would it?
And bring it back to the board.
Yeah, so then 524 will give me some time to like set some staff questions up and things like that with regard to study hall and technology.
Yep.
So that one will be April. Is it okay to try for March on 616? Do you think it's about a month?
Yeah.
603, 616
Put
to
them
come back.
together.
603, 616 March.
I'm okay with
524
that. You
April.
guys okay with that?
Mhm.
I'd rather we do it right.
And
Yeah.
we still need to do Title IX.
We still need to do Title IX, and Dr. Olson and I had started reviewing the security policy before, like in October. So there's just a couple big ones.
When you say 524, does that include the .1 in that as well?
It does.
And the .com.
No, that first.
So, real plus minus, before we wrap up, what worked, what didn't? I'll listen first.
So we're not gonna do anything about responding to the teacher letter that I believe has a number of inaccuracies we ought to be responding to. We're not gonna do anything with that?
So teacher letter's a specific one. I think we've emailed everyone that the administration has that one under the administration's
Yeah.
purview of managing teachers.
Yeah.
So I have chosen not to respond as an individual, because it's
Well, I
being
mean,
managed.
something against the board, I mean, that's a board
Well,
issue.
We are, it's not
Well, actually it is, because.
The one
it's
that
a
was
supervision
sent by-
issue, so.
No,
please let
actually
us-
it isn't, it's the underlying comments. I mean, I don't,
Yep.
I respect the, you know, opinion. I'm just trying to understand, there are certain things said that we need to discuss, whether we need to investigate, research a little bit more, decide as a board how we.
Was the letter a complaint, or was
We
the
have a
letter
chain of
letter?
command here, as you know, it's one of our policies that we were just talking about, and this is a supervision, this is an administrative issue to address staff behavior.
But the one that came to
It's not a
us about
supervision
us,
issue.
the one from the male teacher, isn't that a complaint?
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, a teacher has sent an email, any teacher could send any email. The policy that we have right now, even though I was listed in the email as saying certain things, normally I would like to respond, but I'm gonna follow the policy we have here at school. Until the administration comes back and says, Dan, we need your help here, or what have you, I'm gonna follow the policy we have at school. So, and that right now is the administration is managing it, because I don't follow up on teachers. The administration does
What
that.
about the
I
one
mean, it
we
could have been
received?
anyone, though.
But what about the
Yes.
one we received? So.
That, but that's what I'm saying. Any teacher could email to anyone. That doesn't instantly mean you get to jump the chain of command. That happened twice in the past couple of weeks, and we're trying our best to follow the policies. We can change the policies, that's within our purview, but we need to follow the rules, right?
Okay.
And that's what I'm trying to help us with.
Okay, I'm trying to understand though, if there was the information of the complaint of, are we doing anything about it? The one that came directly to us.
So we as a board are doing nothing right now. We have followed up with the administration and said, this is in your camp. Please follow the chain of command and follow the investigation as needed. We don't talk about individual teachers' performance here at the board. We shouldn't, and I don't think we will.
So in the future, if an allegation comes to the board from a staff member, there won't be a listening session? Because that's what threw me off. There was a listening session by you and Maggie representing us.
No,
No.
no, no, no.
No.
That's
No.
how I read it. And then we got an email with all these takeaways that we didn't agree to.
But that's what
And
I'm trying to
where I
say,
was-
is anybody can write an
concerned.
email and say anyone said anything, and that's why we have an investigative process. So
But
please,
there wasn't a listening session that involved, that you listened on our behalf?
I'm not gonna speak to an investigation that's going on right now. I will say a teacher asked to share some thoughts. I
Okay.
checked it with Cecilia, and I said, will Cecilia be there? Because you are under Cecilia's, oversight. And Cecilia said she would be there. I said, okay, let's listen. I don't think that's wrong. It's just like if I got someone in the hallway. I was very clear that I did not represent the board. I can
Okay,
speak on my
okay.
behalf. Now, there was many things written in the email. I'm not gonna answer to any of
Okay,
those.
that's where I got concerned,
but-
because I thought, wait, shouldn't we all be there if it involves
Absolutely, if
us?
there was a board
Okay,
discussion, absolutely, and it was not.
Okay,
Yep, yep.
okay, all right.
So I was asked to
Okay.
sit in and listen, and I said, okay, any teacher wants to, but I'm not gonna jump over the chain. I'm gonna have administration there because
Okay, okay.
I'm not responsible for I'm personally, as Dan Ellingson, not responsible for any teachers.
So,
Okay.
the letter that we received that listed things out, you're saying that's not a complaint?
No.
Because it
You-
seemed
An
like it was a
email, are you
complaint.
talking about an email you received from a teacher that talked about something Dan said on a call?
No, I'm talking about the one sent to all of us.
That summarized the listening session and the steps that the board was gonna take to remedy the situation.
Is this a email from a different teacher complaining about that
It
teacher?
was the one you
I-
sent to us, you sent it to us, that was part of,
You cut and pasted your listening session
Yeah,
with this individual, and you sent it to us.
and several of the board members said, we need to have a meeting. That's what we're talking about.
What's the question, I guess?
So now that's not a board issue? Is that what
yeah,
you're?
yeah,
Now
I mean,
it's an
it sounded like,
administrative
it
issue?
sounded and felt like it was an official complaint that we needed to address.
I'm not
Well,
sure.
according to the policy, an official complaint can't go to the board unless it's against the executive director specifically. Otherwise, it has to go to the executive director.
Chain of command.
For chain of command. So just because an email gets sent to the board doesn't obligate us to be involved in that.
Okay.
And I didn't edit any, I just copied and pasted what was shared and actually it wasn't even shared during the call, it was shared afterwards as a document, but I just forwarded it on so you guys would know what the thoughts were. I guess I don't have to do that, but I thought I would share what was shared with me, just so you had the same information that, yeah.
So we disregard what it said?
We as a board don't do anything with it. Yes, that's correct. That's the policy. And so please help when people ask you questions, if they do, remind them the policy of how we handle our investigations.
So talk to the executive director.
Yeah, that would really help, because right now what happens sometimes is people get different messages, and then it gets confusing. So if we can all agree on what the policy is on how we manage it, I think that'll go a long ways to cutting out a lot of the round. But as mentioned, if there's we're responsible for Cecilia. If there's a complaint, specifically, again, then we need to have a discussion, probably a big closed meeting because we're a board, and it's pertaining to an individual and potentially performance related, then we can close the meeting and have a discussion. We wouldn't do that with a teacher, not at least the first step.
So you guys as a group are my boss. I'm Kate's boss.
But I'm afraid if every email we had a special board meeting, we might be quite busy.
So then may I
You know, I guess,
I would not like
Dan, my issue is you really should have forwarded it, I feel, to us. And secondly,
Should not have, or
you should have.
Which one?
I'm glad you did, the letter.
Okay.
But also having meetings with people, individuals acting as Dan, you're a chair, and you're the chair of the board, and then the board gets dragged in. I would
And Meg's
prefer
the vice chair.
you just be a little more mindful about that scenario.
I think that's fair, yeah.
So,
I'm happy with,
next time
especially
you
the way it ended up,
Yeah,
looking back, of course.
I would
yes,
appreciate a
but-
little more of having our back. That's how I would appreciate that.
But
Yeah.
the point was to listen, and that's what happened. So I guess I
Follow-up
don't,
threw everybody under the bus.
I don't think that's.
say that again.
The follow-up on it,
I think the date or.
But that's not
you
under,
guys under the bus, us under the bus.
but not under our control.
Right. that's
Can't
all
control
it
how
is.
other people react and respond to things. I don't disagree that
It just
happened,
seems
but
like
just.
false information that was sent out that wasn't corrected.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
And I would just say, I mean, my name
It
was,
should have been corrected because you're,
yeah, and my name was in the email, so I'll tell you, I was the one most tempted to click reply, right? But that's not what we're supposed to do. So I had to bite my fingers because I also want to reply and say, here's another alternative explanation of, but that's not my
Right.
space. So
And I can't talk about what actions the administration is or isn't taking with an
And we don't
employee,
want
because it's a
that.
private
Obviously.
investigation.
Yes.
So I think it's a good question, it's a fair question, we should be able to talk about what we can talk about publicly, but let's try our best to follow the procedures and help if something like this comes up again. And I'll also help to try to make sure you guys are all apprised if I have another request to sit down and listen.
and the Minnesota School Board does have an attorney that's free to talk to about any and all of this. So if anyone wants that information, because I did speak to them, and they are aware of all of what was decided and what was voted on, and they supported the board's decision.
So for tonight's, I think we made some progress, we still have some more to do. But 603, 616, I think will be another good discussion for us to just see if we can't come to closer alignment on how we can manage these things. And so I appreciate the openness and honesty and everyone sharing concerns that we're going to work towards a goal together. Anything else?
Actually, I want to second what you said right there, not as a motion, but just the appreciation of the communication. I think
Yep.
this level of
Plus.
openness is really, really important for a board, and I think it's great. Even though we might have different opinions, there might be some feelings, we all have the feels, right? But it's really important, because then we can just be honest with each other and do better for our kids, and that's what we're here for.
And I will add engaged, because when I have talked to Liz from our authorizer needs to have, updates or whatever, and she would just mention that, not all boards are engaged, not everyone's even showing up. You guys are coming pretty much every session, even for special sessions, so I think we've got a solid board here, and I'm excited to see what we can do as we work together. So thanks so much for hanging in there and doing your, even though
Well,
it's
and
not
that's my
always easy.
big plus.
No group hugs, though.
I think that's our big,
We can do some group
plus.
Yeah.
I call it empty-headed relationships. I don't hold resentments. I got a problem, we talk about it. I feel I'm walking away empty-headed. that I've said my piece. And I like that we all don't agree all the time. That's better. We're not,
Yeah.
so I'm all for that, and, yeah.
Good. All right.
Jennifer, you were the one who made us brave.
Made what? Brave?
Yeah, she made us brave because she would periodically.
Vote
yeah,
against
vote
you
for-
guys every time.
Yes, Hillary. Yeah,
Don't, the first year.
No, you have to, you have to.
Jennifer barely talked that first year, now
Can-
it's like, yay.
Can I make a motion to adjourn at about
Yes.
8:15?
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion we need tonight? Otherwise, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes 9-0. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
See,